Chapter 2045. The Rain of Providence lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. When the rain stopped, the sky became clear again. As for the entire drifting cloud world, because of this rain a tremendous change had occurred, and had risen by who knew how many levels. In the core courtyard, after 3 days and 3 nights of treatment, Muyang, Xiao Changsheng, and Xiao Changsheng finally stabilized Xiaoyang's condition. His aura no longer dissipated. At the very least, his life was no longer in danger. We've done everything we can. As for whether and when he wakes up, it'll be up to Xiaoyang himself. Muyang wiped the sweat off his forehead and said with a bitter smile. Xiao Changsheng also smiled helplessly. Senior Muyang, please forgive us for our earlier suspicions. You're being too serious, fellow Xiao. It would be strange if you didn't suspect anything under those circumstances, Muyang smiled in response. He did not plan to pursue the matter. Moreover, even if you pursue this matter, there's not much meaning to it. Why do you have to say something that will make everyone uncomfortable in their hearts? Now, that Xiaoyang was fine. That was the most important thing to them. The Baldy lowered his head apologetically. How could he not tell that the ancestor of the extreme Yang sect had been doing his best over the past few days? He did not have any ulterior motives at all. As for the murderous intent from before, it was all because he was worried that Han Jingming would rise from the ashes. Fortunately, everything had gone smoothly, and the situation had not developed to a point where they could not accept it. Although they did not know when Xiaoyang would recover and wake up, he was still alive. As long as he was still alive, there was still hope. There was no need to be so depressed. I'm sure everyone is on the verge of a breakthrough like me. Since the opportunity has appeared, let's cherish it. I'm sure no one in the drifting cloud world would dare to offend us now. Muyang smiled. Xiao Changsheng and the Baldy nodded as well. They had obviously sensed it as well. Little girl, there's no need for you to hold him back. Tell Sun Yukai to send someone to guard him. I know you're worried, but it's not worth it for you to delay your cultivation, Muyang said. Lil Man only laughed bitterly and said, Thank you for saving me, senior. Hearing those words, Muyang also understood. With a calm smile, he turned around and left. Xiao, Changxing, and Baldy also looked at him with reluctance, but soon after, they also left. After Xiao Man saw the 3 of them leave, she carried Xiaoyang into the house and waited for him. As for what realm he was in, she wasn't sure, but she wanted to keep watching until the young master woke up. Under this downpour, countless people improved. Qian Guangqi directly reached the 8th level of Kingwu because of this fortuitous encounter. It could be said that he had filled the gap of this level in the flowing cloud world. It could be said that apart from Xiaoyang, Qian Guangqi's talent was the highest in Borealis City. As for the North Pole Dark Feather and the others, they had all improved or made breakthroughs. After taking turns to visit Xiaoyang, they began to take care of everything in the flowing cloud world. No matter how big or small, they had to take care of everything beautifully. After all, this was the flowing cloud world that Xiaoyang had protected with his life. How could they not make it develop even better? Sun Dishing also came out of seclusion. But Sun Yukai did not immediately go into seclusion because he had many matters to attend to. Under the 2 of them, Borealis City began to operate in the shortest amount of time. All of the flowing cloud world's 9th level experts were in seclusion to break through, so the heavy responsibility of repairing the universal circulation formation fell on the shoulders of Qian Guangqi, Arctic Gray Feather, and the others. Fortunately, they had all participated in it before, so they knew it very well. It was also because of the power displayed by the universal circulation formation that they knew that this formation was like a protective umbrella. As long as it was not destroyed, their Borealis City would be safe. As orders were sent out one after another, information was sent back one after another. The number of casualties in this battle was also revealed. There were more than 120 cultivators who had died in this battle. All of them were geniuses of their sections. Among them, there was no lack of 4th and 5th level cultivators of Kingwu. Among them, Borealis City's losses were the greatest. A total of 93 people had died, which was a heart-wrenching news. It was not an exaggeration to say that their vitality was greatly damaged. The rest were the disciples of the Dark Knight, Holy Land, Lunar Sect, and Extreme Yang Sect. This number did not seem like a great loss, but this was not the final battle that was fought on the ground. Such casualties were enough to make one's heart ache. Sun Yukai and Sun Dishing looked at each other. They had worked so hard to create such a great situation. But in this battle, a third of the younger generation had died. They were helpless. Fortunately, under this timely rain, those geniuses would quickly emerge like bamboo shoots after the rain. These losses could be made up, but it was inevitable that people would feel a little reluctant and heartache. Even if the losses were made up, they would not be the same people as before. Their strength would still be weakened. Looking at the list of names, Sun Yukai and Sun Dishing felt a headache coming on. However, they could only put it aside for the time being. They began to issue some new decrees in order to pacify the hearts of the people under this unforeseen event. Then there was the matter of how to compensate those who had died in the battle. These people had died because of the universal circulation formation, and they could be said to be heroes who had died in the battle. This naturally needed to be respected and remembered. It had to be said that the Sun family's two people's abilities were indeed extraordinary. In just 2 days, everything had returned to normal, as if the unforeseen event had never happened. However, at the same time, there were still many people who were worried about Xiao Gongzhu's situation, but no one could find out any news. On the contrary, a few almighty figures had gone into seclusion one after another, which made them feel hopeful. Another day passed, and a preliminary statistic appeared. The strength of the entire drifting cloud realm had directly increased by a realm in grade because of that rain. Some geniuses had even broken through consecutively. For example, Yi 19 of the Anya clan had directly stepped into King Wu's level 5 to level 7. Breaking through 2 levels consecutively was very shocking. After the disaster, the geniuses of the drifting cloud realm had emerged like bamboo shoots after the rain, ushering in a small year that belonged to them. Many people had begun to stand out. Chapter 2046. Good news came one after another, but Sun Dishing and Sun Yukai could not be happy because they were worried that their city lord still showed no signs of waking up in the past few days. This also made them extremely anxious. So what if the entire drifting cloud world worshipped him like a god? He was their only hope. It could be said that Xiaoyang had become the only pillar of support for the drifting cloud world. They even relied heavily on him. In their opinion, as long as Xiaoyang was around, there was no difficulty that they could not overcome. If he was not around, the huge world would lose its backbone and become a pile of loose sand again. 7 days passed. After constant calculations and repairs, the sky circulation formation was completely repaired. Qi and Guangqi and Old Master Xiao would visit Xiaoyang whenever they had free time. Every time they went to visit, it would strengthen their resolve. They would work hard to cultivate and make the drifting cloud realm even more powerful. This was the only way to live up to the prosperity of the drifting cloud world that he had sacrificed his life for. As for the losses from before, there was no need to fuss over them. This was because it had become a foregone conclusion and could not be changed. Even though they were pained, they could only suppress it. After all, they did not know whether Xiao Gongzhu was dead or alive. What right did they have to be sad? It was better to do more things and show Xiao Gongzhu that his hard work had not been in vain. The drifting cloud world was thriving and developing to the extent that they had imagined. It was even developing faster than they had imagined. Perhaps he would be even happier when that happened. Xiaoyang had done things that were beyond his power, so what was the point of them doing things that were within their power? The legend of Xiaoyang began to spread rapidly in the drifting cloud world. Even the surrounding demon world and demon world were filled with respect when they heard the news. Even the Devil Master, who was his mortal enemy back then, was sincerely convinced and full of admiration for him. The original hatred seemed to have started to change because of this disaster. The only thing he had was heartfelt admiration for him. On the 10th day after the rain, Mu Yang came out of seclusion. He had already reached the peak of the 9th stage. After Mu Yang came out of seclusion, he first went to visit Xiaoyang. Then he went to find Sun Yukai and Sun Dishing. The changes that had happened in the past few days made him sincerely admire their abilities. To be able to calm the chaos under the disaster in the shortest amount of time and let everything return to normal again in an orderly manner, one could see how capable these two people were. It was also because of this that Mu Yang admired Xiaoyang even more. When it came to using people, he was really unique. He didn't care about trifles and was just right. It could be said that in the flowing cloud realm in the past, if you had enough strength, you would have the right to speak. Otherwise, no matter how capable you are, you won't be able to hold such a high position. On the other hand, Sun Yukai and Sun Dishing were King Wu 4th stage and King Wu 5th stage respectively. In the Northern Light City, they could only be considered equal to the genius disciples. However, what they were in charge of was the development of the Northern Light City. In fact, even the entire flowing cloud realm was under their control. Many of the Northern Light City's disciples were convinced by them, which showed how capable they were. Senior Mu Yang, after the two of us discussed, we came to a conclusion. Since the City Lord has yet to awaken, it's possible that the profound Do world will come to invade once they get the news. Therefore, we ask Senior to take charge of the Sky Order Array and protect the safety of the flowing cloud realm. Sun Yukai cupped his hands and said. Mu Yang nodded and said no problem. Although this kind of worry seemed a little unnecessary, it was not a problem to do so. After all, the flowing cloud realm was currently immersed in joy. If they weren't careful, there might be some unforeseen events. Therefore, it was much safer for him to keep an eye on everything. After saying a few more words, Mu Yang went to his own place. After arriving at the center of the Sky Order Array, he noticed that the pseudo-spirit vein seemed to have suffered a heavy blow and had become much weaker. He couldn't help but sigh helplessly. After this battle, the spirit array's lifespan has been reduced by at least 30 years. Mu Yang muttered and smiled bitterly. Moreover, 30 years was a conservative estimate. There might even be a longer period of time. Although they had obtained a great victory in this battle, they had also paid a great price. Although they had obtained many benefits after the battle, scars were still scars and were difficult to cover up. Mu Yang stayed in the center of the spirit array, and at the same time he slowly spread out his divine sense to carefully investigate the situation around him. If there was any disturbance, he would be able to react immediately. This kind of thing could be said to be very dry and boring, but Mu Yang didn't think much of it. On the contrary, during these few investigations, he was able to clearly perceive the situation in Northern Light City. There were at least 50 fifth-order disciples in the city. King Wu was a fifth-order disciple. 100 years ago, he was an existence that could dominate a region. But now, it was not an exaggeration to say that he was worthless. The next day, Chu Taiyin broke through to the 9th level and came to Mu Yang's side to exchange experiences and ask for advice. Not long after, Xiao Chongxing and Qin Mingho came out of seclusion one after another. They had also stepped into the 9th level. Another few days passed, and a flame was constantly dancing above the Northern Light City, looking very mischievous. That was Xiaoyang's high-grade heavenly fire. It had now completely devoured Han Jingming's body, and its strength had increased greatly. Mu Yang could clearly sense that Xiao Hua's strength was even more terrifying than his own. This caused Mu Yang to be even more shocked. He could only let out a bitter laugh, helplessly, not to mention that he couldn't compare to Xiaoyang. Even his high-grade, heavenly fire couldn't compare. Comparisons were odious. Although Xiao Hua looked like a child, he shouldered the heavy responsibility of protecting Northern Light City without the slightest bit of negligence. Mu Yang and Xiao Hua took turns to look after Northern Light City. Mu Yang, on the other hand, was more important. What he needed to take care of was the entire Northlight City. A few more days passed, and suddenly Mu Yang's body trembled. He looked up into the sky. Could it be another martial emperor? Mu Yang sucked in a breath of cold air and muttered to himself. Chapter 2047. Inside a tavern in Baisheng City, many cultivators were gathered together. They were drinking and eating. It was a joyful atmosphere. On a high platform, there was an old man with white hair and a white beard. He held a folding fan in his hand and opened it. Everyone subconsciously looked over. The old man was smiling. He clasped his fist and said, "Thank you for coming. Today, we will talk about the battle between Lord Shao and a martial emperor. If you are happy, please give me some money so that I can keep my mouth shut." Right after his words left his mouth, the people present all began to jeer. There were even some rich and overbearing people who opened their mouths and said that if they were happy to hear it, they would naturally not be lacking in benefits. In the corner, there was a man. He was holding a bowl of wine and looked over. He looked very expectant and smiled. Although the man's aura wasn't strong, his face made people feel that he was majestic without being angry. He looked very valiant. Or maybe he was purposely restraining his aura, making him look like a silver spear with a wax head. Beside this valiant man, every table could be said to be fully occupied, except for his table, where he was the only one. Although there were some people who saw some clues and went up to talk to him, they were all dealt with appropriately. To what extent was appropriate? It was just that, after greeting him, the people who came up to talk to him felt that they couldn't continue talking, and he wasn't angry. In the end, he could only laugh it off. Now that the storyteller had started to tell the story, no one bothered with the man anymore. They just let him drink by himself. Ladies and gentlemen, on that day, Lord Shao and Ancestor Muyang were strolling in the backyard. They felt a powerful aura that seemed to have evil intentions. They wanted to take down our flowing cloud realm by themselves and enslave our small realm. Our sect, Lord Shao, is so wise and mighty. How could he allow such a thing to happen? He was so angry that he rose from the ground. He held a divine sword and a silver spear in his hand and stood in the sky to stop the enemy. The storyteller said with a smile, "Most of the people drinking here were people who had come because of the fame. Therefore, they didn't know much about the battle back then. Most of them had only heard about it from others. On the contrary, listening to the storyteller's narration was more in line with what they thought. The storyteller didn't see the beginning and end of the battle with his own eyes. He had only heard some news and then added some details. After asking, I found out that the enemy was an old monster who had lived in the Greenly realm for tens of thousands of years. He was one of the few martial emperors in our 3,000 small realms." When the storyteller said this, it immediately attracted the attention of many people. Almost everyone pricked up their ears. Even though there were many people here who had been suppressed that day, they still clearly knew how powerful that martial emperor was and how powerful Muyang was. What does it mean to be a martial emperor? They have never appeared in our flowing cloud realm for tens of thousands of years of history. Even the number of martial monarchs in the deity's world, the outstanding talents of our 3,000 small realms, can be counted on one hand, the storyteller said. When the valiant man heard this, he stretched out one of his hands and counted it as if it was a real thing. Fortunately, no one noticed him. Otherwise, he would have been ridiculed and questioned. As the storyteller spoke, he started to get excited. He began to exaggerate what he had heard about the battle. At the beginning, the high-level heavenly fire attached to the godly sword was used as the deciding factor. In the end, it was neutralized by the great demon. Furthermore, the great demon used a magic weapon to suppress it. Then, Muyang used the sky circulation formation to gain strength comparable to Shao Gongzhu. The two of them fought 2 against 1. At the beginning, although they had a slight advantage, they were still suppressed by the great demon. What the storyteller said was indeed a few things that happened during the battle. However, after going through a lot of embellishments, the scene was extremely dazzling, causing people to be endlessly shocked. He said that Xiaogong could summon thunder with a wave of his hand, causing everything within 1,000 miles to tremble. As for old ancestor Muyang, his Saint-tier, high-tier Dharma artifact was used to its fullest potential. The raging flames burned the horizon red. He said that the martial emperor was unstoppable. Everyone in the flowing cloud realm worked together to deal with him. When the valiant man heard these words, the smile at the corner of his mouth gradually deepened. As expected, it's good to talk about it. Let's drink, the valiant man muttered with a smile. Then he drank the wine in his bowl in one gulp. Then he poured himself a glass of wine. When he heard something interesting, the valiant man also cheered. Towards the end, Xiaogong's shocking sword skills were very admirable. In the end, the martial emperor wanted to turn the tables and try to possess Xiaogong's body. However, Xiaogong was already prepared. He used the martial emperor's body as a cage and locked him up. Of course, they did not know that Mu Yang wanted to kill Xiaoyang. Even if they knew, they would not say it. It was just a misunderstanding. After listening to the storyteller's story, the valiant man laughed out loud and said, "Xiaoyang is truly a hero of the present age. How admirable." After saying that, the valiant man drank even more wine. Suddenly, the valiant man saw that the crowd was looking at him strangely. He immediately threw down the wine jar and ran away. How could the crowd tolerate this person calling Xiaogong by his name? It was a great disrespect. However, when they chased after him, he had already disappeared without a trace. The old storyteller lowered his head and saw that there was a jade pendant on his chopping board. It was shining brightly. Even though his cultivation was not high, he could tell that it was not an ordinary item. The crowd looked around for a long time, but they could not find any trace of the valiant man. Then they returned to the tavern happily to drink. In Borealis City, in a remote alley, a valiant man leaned against the wall and panted heavily. He patted his chest and muttered, "These guys are really fanatical. I only called him by his name. Is there a need to chase me like this?" As the valiant man spoke, he had an extremely bitter look on his face. However, he immediately revealed a trace of a smile. Xiaoyang was indeed extraordinary. Even in his own world, his reputation was very good. He even protected his own world with all his might. People like him always had a bottom line. Being friends with people like him was reassuring. Suddenly, the valiant man frowned and prepared to run away. However, just as he took a step forward, someone appeared in front of him and blocked his path. "Fellow from that world, why have you come to visit the flowing cloud realm?" Mu Yang asked with a smile, holding the vermilion flame token. Chapter 2048. The valiant man looked at the old man in front of him and smiled helplessly. Soon after, his eyes were filled with admiration. He tidied up his appearance and smiled. "I am Qi Feng. I heard that Master Xiao fought with a martial emperor expert until the sky turned dark and the earth turned dark. It was a spectacular sight, so I came here because of the fame." Mu Yang was slightly stunned by this expert, who introduced himself. Soon after, he adjusted his state of mind and said, "Senior, why did you come here this time? If I came to visit Master Xiao, I might have to return in disappointment. A few days ago, Master Xiao went into seclusion to break through to the martial emperor realm. I don't know when he will come out." Mu Yang was not sure whether this man called Qi Feng was a friend or foe, so he did not dare to reveal any information. He could only reject him. When Qi Feng heard this, he could not help but laugh. He naturally knew what kind of situation Xiaoyang was in now. However, he had a higher opinion of Mu Yang. Back then, he was only at the 9th rank upper tier. He dared to use the power of the sky circulation formation to fight with the old monster, Han Jingming. Now, he even used that opportunity to reach a higher level. Even when he first came to the flowing cloud world, he was discovered by him. It could be seen how powerful this person was. It had to be said that there were hidden dragons and crouching tigers in the flowing cloud world. In the past few days of visiting, Chi Feng found that although the cultivators of the flowing cloud world were generally of low cultivation, they still had some people who could hold the fort. These people's talents were not bad. It was just that this broken and barren land limited their talents. If they were both in the God realm, the disciples of the flowing cloud world and the God realm would not be too different. Of course, the best proof was the appearance of the sky circulation formation and the reign of opportunity after Han Jingming's death. It allowed countless cultivators to use this great opportunity to soar into the sky and start to crazily increase their cultivation. That's a pity. Next, I'll walk around the flowing cloud world. Is there a problem? Chi Feng asked with a smile. When these words came out, Mu Yang could not help but feel fear in his heart. Because he didn't know the origin of this outsider in front of him and didn't know the details of his strength, he didn't dare to rashly agree. But now that the flowing cloud world had suffered a great calamity, it would not be good for them to start another war. So how he would agree would become an extremely difficult problem that would test his ability to adapt. Looking at his current appearance, he really couldn't think of how he should deal with this situation in a way that could be considered appropriate, under the premise that he wouldn't offend this person and force him to back off. It seemed that there was no such thing as a perfect solution. Chi Feng saw the difficult expression on Mu Yang's face and helplessly laughed bitterly. He was naturally clearly aware that the current drift cloud world was like a bird startled by the twang of a bow. Moreover, Xiao Yang's fate was unknown, so it was normal for them to be anxious and uncomfortable. All right, I won't make things difficult for you. I am someone from the divine realm, and I was ordered to capture Han Jingming the last time. Chi Feng went straight to the point and said. Hearing this, Mu Yang's heart trembled. If this person was from the divine realm, then he would have to carefully consider it. Although they had yet to form an alliance with the divine realm, they could be considered as half an ally. Moreover, the divine realm was the undisputed number one of the 3,000 small worlds, and the flowing cloud world could not afford to offend it. At the same time, Mu Yang's heart felt a lot more at ease, because for such an expert to appear, it would be strange if he wasn't someone from the divine realm. Mu Yang had once heard from that young man that the majority of martial emperors were in the divine realm. Because of this, Chi Feng's origin wasn't strange at all. Since it is a fellow from the divine realm who has come to visit, then it is truly an honor. However, Master Xiao is currently in closed-door training and cannot show himself. I hope that you can forgive him. At this moment, Mu Yang's expression had become much more relaxed. Chi Feng did not make things difficult for Mu Yang. On the contrary, with his attitude of wanting to protect Xiaoyang and not letting him be affected in the slightest, he was indeed a trustworthy person. However, in the past few days of investigation, Chi Feng had gained some understanding of this place. Then he said, I'm afraid that Xiaoyang isn't in closed-door training right now. Instead, he is heavily injured and is on the verge of death. Hearing this, a trace of hesitation flashed across Mu Yang's eyes, but he quickly returned to normal. He laughed awkwardly. Trying to deceive a martial emperor expert was indeed not an easy thing to do. Of course, Xiaoyang's situation wasn't that bad. At least his life was saved. However, when would he be able to wake up? That was a huge problem. In fact, it was normal for them to not be able to wake up. If I really had the intention of harming you, I wouldn't have had to make the trip when you found out about it. The reason why I'm traveling in the flowing cloud world is to learn more about this world. Although your overall strength isn't that strong, it's not as barren as I imagined, Chi Feng said with a smile. Chi Feng had heard from unrivaled God that the flowing cloud world was in shambles. The only one who could help was Xiaoyang. Most of the almighties from the sects here were only at the 5th level of King Wu. However, looking at it now, in the short span of a few years, this mini-world had undergone such a huge change. From this, it could be seen how terrifying Xiaoyang's ability was. At least, this was something that Chi Feng thought was quite rare. However, I've mostly learned killing techniques. As for how to save people, I really have no idea. However, you don't have to worry. My second brother will arrive in the flowing cloud world in a few days. When the time comes, he will naturally have a way, Qi Feng said with a smile. Mu Yang's expression changed slightly. If the Almighties from the God realm were to come and help, there would be great hope. Of course, as Mu Yang had never met anyone from the God realm, and he wasn't very clear about some of the twists and turns, he was still cautious. Qi Feng didn't care because in his eyes, no matter what Mu Yang did, it was something very normal. He just wanted to protect this world. What was wrong with that? However, it was hard to say which direction things would develop in. However, now, Qi Feng admired Xiaoyang even more. This was because, in his opinion, the person who had defeated Wei Beixin back then was indeed worthy of a battle. Although the time of the battle was still uncertain, he couldn't wait for that day to come. After all, what more could he ask for when he had such an opponent? Chapter 2049. After communicating, Mu Yang made a concession. Moreover, this was an almighty martial emperor from the realm of the gods. He could not afford to offend him. At the very least, before Xiaoyang woke up, he had to be careful. Otherwise, he might accidentally offend this almighty. When that time came, things would become even more serious. That was not something he could bear. The Qin king, Xin Qifeng, was not an unreasonable person. He expressed his understanding of Mu Yang's fear. After all, the current flowing cloud realm was too pitiful. It was like a frightened bird. Moreover, the realm of the gods owed Xiaoyang 2 favors. As such, they could not turn their backs on him. Under Mu Yang's lead, the Qin king successfully entered the northern light city's city, Lord's Manor. He also informed everyone that this was an important guest from the realm of the gods. After entering the city Lord's Manor, the Qin king was naturally most concerned about Xiaoyang's current situation. As such, he had Mu Yang bring him to investigate. In the end, the result was the same. Although he had many battle techniques, he still did not understand how to save someone. Moreover, the Qin king's elder brother, Qingda, was already on his way. As such, the Qin king did not act rashly. Instead, he had everyone continue to wait. Although Sun Dishing and the others could not help but feel disappointed when they found out that this almighty from the realm of the gods was helpless, they did not show it. After all, there was still hope. However, this also made them realize that the injuries that Xiaoyang had suffered this time were extremely serious and terrifying. Even the supreme beings of the god realm were unable to do anything about it. This meant that this matter was extremely troublesome. In an instant, many people became even more worried. They were afraid that Xiaoyang would not be able to wake up again. However, their hope was not extinguished. The Qin king had already made it clear that his elder brother was more proficient in healing. As such, there was still that almighty present. Many people waited anxiously. In their eyes, the almighty from the realm of the gods was their hope. Perhaps they had some miraculous medicine or almighty technique that could bring the dead back to life. That was something that could not be said. Time passed slowly, and the Qin emperor stayed in Xiaoyang's courtyard. He was rather interested in Xiaoyang's maidservant, Xiaoman, because he discovered that this little girl's natural talent was indeed extraordinary. In fact, he would even unintentionally reveal some of the true meaning of cultivation. However, in the end, King Qin could only sigh helplessly, because everything he did was undoubtedly like playing the lute to a cow. Now, Lil Man was wholeheartedly thinking about how to let the young master wake up as soon as possible. She didn't care about the matter of cultivation at all. Even though she knew that this valiant man was an almighty from the god realm and was an honored guest of their flowing cloud realm, she didn't bother to pay attention to him. She only did her due etiquette so that outsiders wouldn't think that her young master was a wild girl. It could be said that Lil Man's state of mind was very pure. It was also because of this that she didn't have too many worries when it came to cultivation. Instead, it allowed her to maintain a good state of mind. In terms of cultivation, It could be said that she was rather proud of it. King Qin wasn't annoyed by this little girl's lack of understanding. Instead, he felt that Xiao Yang's charm was astonishing. Under such circumstances, he had revealed his identity, but the flowing cloud realm merely treated him as an honored guest. In their hearts, the person who was the greatest was still Xiao Yang. It could be seen just how much this young man had done for this world in these past few years to be able to gain such popularity. Of course, there were still some people who came because of his reputation. However, most of them only came to admire this almighty from the God realm. There were also some people who were tempted, but they couldn't get over the hurdle in their hearts. Therefore, they didn't come to curry favor. This news had always been sealed within the Northern Light City and had never spread out. After all, if this news were to spread, it would probably cause a huge commotion. At that time, it would be even harder to control the Northern Light City. Therefore, it was naturally best if this matter could be controlled. King Qin didn't say a word about this. He also didn't like these social gatherings. He felt that the Northern Light City had saved him a lot of trouble. As for the God Emperor's previous instructions, King Qin didn't carry them out. After all, whether or not Xiaoyang would be able to wake up was still a question. With nothing to do, King Qin began to wander around the Northern Light City. What he was most interested in was the universal orbit formation. In that battle, it could be said that if it wasn't for this formation, this world would have been destroyed in a day. Facts spoke louder than words. The fact that the flowing cloud realm had stubbornly survived under Han Jingming's attack and even killed him was enough to prove many things. As for Mu Yang, after he finished giving instructions, he returned to his post. Now that the flowing cloud realm needed his protection, he didn't dare to slack off in the slightest. After all, this world had been created by Xiaoyang using his own life. How could he not properly protect it? At the same time, Mu Yang observed King Qin from the God realm. After all, he wasn't completely sure of King Qin's background. He still needed to be on guard to avoid any mistakes. Fortunately, King Qin had been in Xiaoyang's residence from the start. Although he had been walking around the Northern Light City, he hadn't done anything. Even though he was surrounded, he still left calmly and didn't show any bad emotions. As time passed, Mu Yang also realized that this Almighty was very likely to be a martial emperor expert, an existence that was guaranteed to be genuine. After all, even with Mu Yang's current peak strength as King Wu and the support of the universal orbit formation, he still couldn't see through King Qin's cultivation. This showed how terrifying he was. Although King Qin had always been very friendly and didn't do anything bad, Mu Yang still didn't let down his guard. 10 days after his meeting with King Qin, Mu Yang suddenly opened his eyes. He could feel 2 powerful auras rushing towards him. Mu Yang rose from the ground and stood on top of Borealis City. Very quickly, he saw 2 figures rapidly approaching him. The 2 auras didn't contain any hostility. However, they looked very nervous. He could feel that one of them was as powerful as he was, and the other was even more powerful. It wasn't hard to deduce that they were probably people who thought that King Wu was at the peak and people who thought that they were stronger than King Wu. Very quickly, the 2 people stopped when they were 10 feet away from Mu Yang. The middle-aged man was cultured and refined while the young man was full of vigor. Chapter 2050. May I ask if you're the king and young master Shen Wushuang? Mu Yang cupped his fists and smiled. The Emperor of Qin had told him before. Of course, he was also afraid of causing unnecessary misunderstandings. Although the Emperor of Qin had never been one to care about trifles, this did not mean that his second brother was the same. It could be said that most people in the God realm had a common problem, and that was arrogance. Sometimes they might be unhappy and purposely want to disgust others by resorting to petty tricks. To them, it might be a prank, but to the current drifting cloud realm, it might be a disaster. That's right, Shen Wushuang said anxiously. After Shen Wushuang found out about what happened in the drifting cloud realm, he had been very anxious. It could even be said that he was burning with impatience. He wanted to know what was going on. Although he had received some information intermittently, it was not as real as seeing it with his own eyes. The king nodded slightly and said, "My fourth brother must have explained everything clearly." Mu Yang smiled and nodded, saying, "Senior Emperor of Qin did." "If that's the case, let's cut to the chase. I'll go check on Xiaoyang first." "What do you think?" the king said anxiously. It could be said that Xiaoyang was the outsider whom the King residents had invested the most in. Now he even had hopes of forming an alliance with the God Realm. He admired such a young man very much. Therefore, he also wanted to see if he could save him. When Mu Yang heard those words, hope reignited in his heart once again. Perhaps Xiaoyang really had a chance to wake up. He immediately waved his hand and said, "Please." "Second brother, I'm here." Suddenly a voice called out. The king nodded slightly at Mu Yang and then went straight to North Light City. After entering the Northern Light City, the king was also astonished. Soon after, the corner of his mouth revealed a somewhat complacent smile. Now he thought even more highly of the young man who had entered the God Realm as King Wu's rank 7 cultivation base. As the saying goes, a scholar who has been away for 3 days must be looked at with new eyes. Who would have thought that in such a short period of time, Xiaoyang would be able to do so many things, causing the entire flowing cloud world to change? This showed just how powerful he was. Unrivaled God, on the other hand, was very anxious because he wanted to know what was going on with his friend. After arriving at the residence, the Duke of Qin led the Duke of De to Xiaoyang's room. Sun Dishing, Chen Mingho, and the others followed closely behind. As unrivaled God had visited the flowing cloud realm before, many people in North Light City knew him. As such, they no longer had any doubts about the identities of these two mighty figures. After entering the room, unrivaled God saw that although Xiaoyang looked normal, his aura was weak and he looked like a living corpse. He could not help but feel terrible. The king quickly walked over and immediately began to investigate. As soon as the Duke of Deking's power entered Xiaoyang's body, he could not help but be shocked. His face was filled with disbelief. When everyone saw that the Almighty from the divine realm had such a serious expression on his face, they couldn't help but start to panic. Could it be that this Almighty was also at his wits' end? If that was the case, would their Lord Xiao really have to spend the rest of his life in a coma? This kid's tendons, bones, and internal organs were shattered countless times in that battle. However, each time they were shattered, he would forcefully recover with the help of the medicine. After a few times, his vitality was greatly damaged. The Duke of Deking said as he shook his head helplessly. Xiaoyang's body could be said to be in terrible condition now. The medicine that was left behind was still eating away at his body. If it were not for Xiaoyang's strong enough body, he might have collapsed long ago. This also made De Wang very shocked. What kind of body could be maintained like this, allowing the body to remain in such a subtle state? If it were someone else, they would have died long ago. It could be said that Xiaoyang's current situation was to forcefully preserve his last breath so that it would not leak out. Even most of his soul is not in his body, the Duke of Deking said as his face darkened. If a person's body was destroyed, as long as his soul was strong enough, he could seize another body and be reborn. But now, Xiaoyang's soul was incomplete. How could he seize another body? And this was also the reason why Xiaoyang had not been able to wake up all this time. Only a strand of his soul was left in his body. After everyone heard this, they became pessimistic in their hearts. Back then, the old monster Han Jingming's soul entered Lord Zhao's body. I'm afraid it was caused by the battle at that time, Chu Taiyin said sadly. After the Duke of Deking heard this, his face became strange. If that's the case, it makes sense. However, I haven't discovered Han Jingming's soul fragment. It's clear that Xiaoyang has won. However, I can't say for sure when his soul will recover, the Duke of Deking said after some hesitation. However, the Duke of Deking did not mention the worst situation, which was that even martial emperors like them would find it difficult to heal a damaged soul. However, Xiao Yang's condition was so severe that there was no way he could recover from it. However, in order to not extinguish the hope of the people of the drifting cloud world, he did not tell the truth. Xiao Yang would probably never wake up again. Afterwards, the Duke of Deking took out a few pills and crushed them for Xiao Yang to consume. I've done everything I can. Whether Xiao Yang can wake up or not will depend on his fortune, said the Duke of Deking. It could be said that the Duke of Deking had used all the precious pills that were beneficial to Xiao Yang's current situation. If he still could not wake up, then there was nothing he could do. At the very least, in the Duke of Deking's eyes, it was much more difficult for Xiao Yang to wake up than for the realm of the gods. The words he had said before were just to appease everyone's hearts. The Duke of Qin sat at the side, sulking. The people of the drifting cloud world did not understand what was going on, but he knew very well. Although the Duke of Qin felt that it was a pity, it was normal. Xiao Yang had defied the heavens and killed a martial emperor. That was already a miracle. It wouldn't have been strange even if he had died, but now he looked like a living corpse. This was the most troublesome part. The Duke of Qin was very sad when he thought that his opponent might never wake up. Chapter 2051. After the King explained some things, he was even more worried. He left some pills for Xiao Man and told her to feed him every day to see if he could use the medicinal power to wake him up. Perhaps there would be some miracles. The King was not in a hurry to leave. Instead, he stayed in Northlight City. This was because he had come with a mission this time. However, Xiao Yang was currently in the state of a living dead. This made it difficult for him to make a decision. How to deal with this matter had become a knot in his heart. He didn't know what to do to be the right way to deal with it. Therefore, the King was prepared to stay in the flowing cloud world for a while. If Xiao Yang did not show any signs of improvement after half a year, he could only prepare for the worst and treat the flowing cloud world well. The King told the Emperor God everything about the situation here. He did not leave out any details. When the Emperor God heard the news in the God world, his expression darkened. For the first time, he did not maintain his image. Instead, he lay on a stool and looked rather comical. The Emperor God was no longer as wise and mighty as before. All he had was endless loneliness. His eyes had also become much murkier. "Father, how are you going to rule the God world with this attitude?" The woman frowned and asked. The God Emperor glanced sideways at his daughter, and the smile at the corners of his mouth turned into one of helplessness. "Do you know that you owe Xiao Yang 2 favors?" The Emperor God said. Princess Mingzhu did not refute this. She naturally understood the logic behind it. The first time they were in the divine tomb, if Xiao Yang had not been prepared, and if he had not killed the 3 from the green Li boundary with lightning speed, and if he had not given up some things to reach an agreement with Lei Dingtian, they would not have been able to get out of the divine tomb. As for the second favor, Xiao Yang had killed Han Jingming and allowed a portion of the martial king fate to return to the 3,000 small worlds. Of course, Princess Mingzhu had her doubts about this. After all, the pavilion closest to the water enjoys the moonlight first. The fate was right beside Xiao Yang, but he could not grasp it. What was this? It could be said that Princess Mingzhu was the darling of the 3,000 small worlds. No matter which martial emperor fell, this luck would fall on him. Seeing that Princess Mingzhu was a little unconvinced, the God Emperor snorted coldly and said, "Do you know why Xiao Yang wasn't able to grab hold of that destiny at the first moment? It's not that he can't grab it, but that he's seriously injured and can't move at all." Princess Mingzhu's expression did not change. She was just lucky. Right now, more than half of Xiao Yang's soul is missing, leaving only a wisp of it behind. "I'm afraid he won't be able to wake up for the rest of his life." The God Emperor sighed helplessly as he spoke. Of course, in the eyes of many people, Xiao Yang, who was at the peak of Qingwu, was lucky enough to be able to kill a martial emperor expert. It was already a great fortune for him to be alive. However, in the God Emperor's opinion, this was still a fly in the ointment. This was because, in his opinion, if such a nature-defying existence was still around, when the god realm ascended to the middle world in the future, he would definitely have one more reliable ally. He would definitely be a great help in the future. However, the other party had already displayed all of his abilities, but the price he had paid was unavoidably too great. Moreover, these were all irreversible. As a martial emperor expert, the god emperor naturally knew how terrifying a god's soul was. Even though Xiaoyang had previously displayed how terrifying a god's soul was in his 10 Directions, 8 Wastelands map, he was only at the level of King Wu after all. The difference between him and a martial emperor was too great. Princess Mingzhu, on the other hand, was slightly moved. She did not expect this. If they were to fight, she would naturally feel that it was nothing. However, in the current situation, it was Xiaoyang who had fought hard, allowing her to take advantage of the situation. It could be said that under Xiaoyang's desperate charge, there was no doubt that he had made a gift for the others. Even though the Rain of Luck had raised the overall power of the drifting cloud realm by a level, so what? It was still far from being as direct as a martial emperor expert. If that's the case and Xiaoyang doesn't wake up, then I'll take him as my husband, Princess Mingzhu said after hesitating for a long time. Princess Mingzhu admired the young man quite a lot. When the god emperor heard this, he laughed helplessly and bitterly. How could he not understand the meaning behind Princess Mingzhu's words? A living dead person would not affect her at all. Instead, it would make people sigh for her and feel that she was affectionate and righteous. At the same time, it would also become a shield that would cause those who pursued her to shrink back. If you had such thoughts in the past, I would be very assured to hand the god realm over to you. However, now, I feel that you're a little cold, the god emperor said with a complicated expression. Princess Mingzhu was stunned. Now, she really did not understand what her father was thinking. However, Princess Mingzhu was not prepared to think too deeply about it. After all, these things could be done in the future. After all, if she wanted to inherit the god emperor's great legacy, it would be at least 10,000 years later. Oh, if you only rely on the charm of your talent, you won't be able to convince the entire god realm. Moreover, the god realm will become even bigger in the future, the god emperor said helplessly. Princess Mingzhu was stunned for a moment before she came back to her senses. She had already understood the meaning and knack behind it. Of course, to her, this was still very far away. At the very least, the alliance of the few worlds had not been implemented yet. As for what it would be like in the future, it was hard to say. Go back and cultivate in seclusion. I've already taught you everything that I can. Let me have some peace and quiet, the god emperor said as he sat up and waved his hand. Princess Mingzhu immediately stood up and cupped her hands. She said, I'll take my leave. When Xiaoyang regained consciousness, he also felt that his eyes were filled with chaos and a vast expanse of whiteness. It was as if he was in a fairyland. He felt light as a feather, and it was a wonderful feeling. However, the feeling of his feet not touching the ground was not as wonderful. Suddenly, a sharp pain came. It made him clench his teeth and his face almost distorted. Where exactly was he? This thought popped up in Xiaoyang's mind. Everything in front of him was too wonderful. Moreover, it seemed like he had never been to this place before. Could it be that he had been defeated in the Battle of Souls and was trapped somewhere by Han Jingming using some kind of method? Chapter 2052. However, Xiaoyang rejected that very quickly. If Han Jingming had really won, he would probably be in purgatory right now. How could he still be so carefree? After all, Xiaoyang had destroyed Han Jingming's body. How could Han Jingming treat Xiaoyang kindly when he was enraged? At the very least, that was completely impossible in his opinion. As a result, what exactly had happened was still a question that no one could understand. Xiaoyang was extremely confused about where he was. At the same time, he tried his best to sense his surroundings. However, the senses of his soul became extremely heavy at that moment. Everything he sensed was still a vast expanse of whiteness. Xiaoyang was extremely surprised by the change. Very soon, he discovered some changes. The white mist was constantly surging into his body. Xiao Yang soon realized that it was only his soul that was present. The white mist was constantly surging into his soul, as if it was about to fuse with it. The mist gave Xiao Yang an extremely familiar feeling. As a result, he did not resist. Instead, he enjoyed the process very much. Although there would be some pain from time to time, he could endure it. Xiao Yang had no idea what the mist was for. He only felt that he should absorb it. As time passed, Xiao Yang could sense that the mist was repairing the wounds from the previous battle. He was a little surprised by this. Before long, Xiao Yang, who had only woken up for a short while, fell asleep again due to exhaustion. It was a vast expanse of whiteness, like chaos. When Xiao Yang woke up again, he was still in the white mist, where he could not see his fingers. However, he could sense that something was different about him. His soul seemed to have become even more powerful under the support of some wondrous power. Due to the vast expanse of whiteness before him, Xiao Yang no longer used his eyes to look. Instead, he began to use his heart to sense what was going on. However, the first thing that Xiao Yang sensed was that a white cloud had appeared in his heart. In the blink of an eye, the white cloud had transformed into the appearance of a beauty. Although his facial features were distinct, because he was a white cloud, he looked like a human. Suddenly, Xiao Yang's heart could not help but tremble. The heart of the world. Xiao Yang mumbled in astonishment. He had already begun to sense the heart of the world earlier and had found it. However, he was unable to communicate with it. He could only wait silently, not daring to disturb it at all. At that moment, many details quickly pieced together in Xiao Yang's heart. Some of his doubts began to be gradually resolved. "You saved me," Xiao Yang said in delight. At the last moment, even though Xiao Yang had comprehended the new sword technique of the Thunderfire sword technique, he had been unable to use it due to the lack of strength. The sudden heaven and earth simultaneous force had come too suddenly. Due to the urgency of the matter, he had not looked into it too deeply. However, now it seemed that this force had been given to him by the heart of the world of the drifting cloud boundary. The reason why the heart of the world gave him this force was very simple. It wanted him to protect this boundary. At that moment, Xiao Yang was practically bursting with joy. He had been doing his best to obtain the recognition of the heart of the world all this time. Now that happiness had come so suddenly, how could he not be excited? It could be said that ever since Xiao Yang had stepped into the upper stream, he had begun to rush about to protect the drifting cloud boundary. Ever since then, he had received the attention of the heart of the world. From the very beginning, they brought back treasures from the outside to improve the flowing cloud world's barrenness. Towards the end, with the appearance of the heavenly cycle array, countless heavenly treasures were buried or planted in the ground, and they began to gather spirit energy. All of this was happening. These images flashed through Xiao Yang's mind, and the corners of his mouth curled into a smile. Everything he did was monitored by the World Core, which was why he could sense the World Core. It was the World Core that allowed him to sense it. In fact, the World Core had also injected its own fortune into the Rain of Fortune, which was why all the cultivators in the flowing cloud realm had benefited from it. In other words, "I've received your recognition." Xiao Yang suppressed his excitement and asked. However, there was no response to Xiao Yang. However, a thought appeared in his mind. "If I fail, may heaven and earth destroy me." Xiao Yang couldn't help but be shocked when he thought of this. The World Core's evil aura seemed to be rather heavy. Xiao Yang laughed bitterly and said, "Since that's the case, you should understand. I'll also give you my backing. I'll bring the flowing cloud boundary to a middle world. However, once my cultivation is sufficient, I'll go to a higher world. However, before that, I'll definitely hand you over to a reliable person. Of course, if you're unwilling, I'll make arrangements for you." Although Xiao Yang didn't know what the World Core had experienced or what kind of nature it had developed, he still felt that it wasn't a big deal. However, he still had to make himself clear. "Just call me Flowing Cloud. This thought appeared in Xiaoyang's mind. Xiaoyang nodded slightly. He knew that he had received the World Core's recognition. Furthermore, they had already signed a contract. In the future, Xiaoyang and the flowing cloud boundary would be on the same side. They would share honor and disgrace together. Suddenly, another line of words appeared in Xiaoyang's mind. He closed his eyes again. Suddenly, what he sensed was the entire flowing cloud world. It was as if everything was in his heart. With a thought, he saw North Light City. Mu Yang sat on the sky circulation formation, guarding it conscientiously. With another turn, he saw the lunar sect. The disciples on the mountain were bustling with activity. As long as Xiaoyang wanted to see something, he would be able to sense it with a thought. As long as it was in the flowing cloud boundary, it would be in his heart. Xiaoyang looked down at the entire flowing cloud boundary, feeling the various states of the world. Suddenly, a thought appeared in Xiaoyang's mind. Could he see the middle and lower worlds? In the blink of an eye, Xiaoyang saw the Xiao family mountain in the lower world. That was the place where he had been reborn. It was the place where everything had started anew. Those friends of his from back then had already become overlords of a region. Chapter 2053. Looking at the lower realm cultivator's flourishing appearance, Xiaoyang couldn't help but chuckle. In fact, in the years that he had left, many geniuses had risen to the top. They were like bamboo shoots after the rain, continuously appearing, which made people feel gratified. Soon after, Xiaoyang shifted his thoughts and saw the middle realm. Everything could be said to be incomparably real. He could feel everything clearly. For example, he could clearly feel the airflow created by a bird flying through the air and how much impact it had. As long as he wanted to observe a place, he would be able to sense it clearly and carefully. Nothing would be able to escape his perception. Now, Xiaoyang could be considered the true ruler of the flowing cloud realm. His previous title as the Lord of the Alliance was just the sentiment of the people. Now he'd even obtained the recognition of the drifting cloud world, and he could utilize the abilities and certain forces of this world. To Xiaoyang, this was a pleasant surprise and something that he did not expect at all. Now he could not help but feel excited. This was because the current situation was quite wonderful. After inspecting the lower stream realm and the middle stream realm, he found that everything was going well, so he was quite satisfied. In fact, there were already a few geniuses in the middle stream realm who showed signs of ascending to the upper stream realm, although they were only a step away from the final step. However, when one would be able to kick the door open would depend on one's luck. This wasn't something that could be determined with just a few words. At least from Xiaoyang's point of view, he did not dare to rashly say that everything was set in stone. After all, the world was unpredictable, and no one knew what would happen next. This was not something that he could control. Moreover, as the ruler of the flowing cloud realm, Xiaoyang had to be even more careful. Who knew when an unintentional action would completely change the situation of the world, or even stir up shocking waves that would drag countless people into it. At that time, if there were any more disturbances, the losses would outweigh the gains. As such, he just had to allow things to develop and not interfere with them with absolute power. Moreover, what Xiaoyang needed to do now was to focus all of his attention on the upper stream realm and make a change and become even stronger. Although it would be extremely difficult, he still needed to give it a try in order to obtain a satisfactory result. Soon after, Xiaoyang withdrew his divine sense, and a satisfied smile appeared on his face. It could be said that everything was like a dream, but it was also incredibly real. However, at the very least, since he could form a contract with the World Core, he would naturally be able to receive many benefits. This was because the combination of the two was closely related, and they would share both honor and disgrace. As long as one side made a mistake, the other side would naturally be greatly affected as well. Xiaoyang was also clear about this point. At the same time, he also understood how difficult the task on his shoulders was. It could be said that under the influence of each other, Xiaoyang also had to put in more effort. "Follow me," A thought flashed through Xiao Yang's mind, and he followed the woman in the clouds. Wherever his divine sense passed, he could see the ground below. After a short while, Xiao Yang arrived in front of a huge mountain. When he saw the mountain, Xiao Yang was extremely shocked. He had already traveled through the entire flowing cloud world, but this place had not affected him at all. It could be said that he had never been here before. What was this place? Or did this place not belong to the flowing cloud world? At that moment, countless thoughts flashed through Xiao Yang's mind, but he was unable to verify them. What is this place? Xiao Yang asked. Since the woman in the clouds had brought him here, she naturally knew. If she was willing to let him know, she would naturally speak. This place is called the Flowing Cloud Mystery Realm, and it is the place where the flowing cloud world cultivates. A thought came to his mind. Xiao Yang was stunned for a moment, and then he laughed bitterly. Every world had its own secret realm, but it was not an easy task to open it. For example, in the Thousand Thunder realm, there was a Thousand Thunder mystery realm, but it would only open once every 100 years. As long as one was an outstanding person, they could enter the mystery realm to cultivate and find their own opportunities. Of course, the mystery realm in every world was different. For example, the mystery realm in the flowing cloud world was used to test and train the world lord. As for when it could open, it had to be recognized by the world heart to appear here. Xiao Yang took a deep breath and suppressed the thoughts in his mind. Although you have received my recognition, and I am willing to form a contract with you to share honor and disgrace with you, the mystery realm is still not enough. However, the test of the mystic realm could not be omitted. The mystery realm is said to be a test, but it is more to help you improve your physique, strengthen your body and soul. When this thought appeared, Xiao Yang was overjoyed. He could even see the martial emperor realm waving at him, and it was already in his bag. What is the situation inside? Xiao Yang asked expectantly. However, the world heart did not answer him. It was as if it was not willing to reveal anything and wanted him to experience and feel it himself. After not getting a response for a long time, Xiao Yang put this thought aside for the time being. After all, many things could not be forced. If one wanted to reach a higher level, it would not be a good thing, and it might even be a disaster. At least, Xiao Yang thought that no matter what the situation inside was, he had to go in and take a look. After all, there were not many opportunities to enter the mystery realm to train. Moreover, if he could pass the test of the mystery realm, then he could be considered the true lord of the flowing cloud world. As the lord of a world, being powerful was a must. However, more importantly, he had to obtain the approval of this world. Clearly, the entire drift cloud world wasn't something that the world core could fully represent. There were still some places that Xiao Yang had to challenge and obtain approval. If that is the case, then let us begin, Xiao Yang said confidently. Now that everything was clear, Xiao Yang was eager to become the lord of the flowing cloud world. So he wanted to accept the test as soon as possible. Chapter 2054. Hand seals activate. After this thought appeared in Xiao Yang's mind, a series of hand seals began to appear in his mind. He followed up with an extremely fast speed and quickly formed these hand seals without the slightest hesitation. After forming a few hand seals, Xiao Yang bellowed out and immediately struck out with his palm. Immediately, a white cloud drifted out and embedded itself into the mountain. Immediately, the mountain began to rapidly become illusory. In a short while, it became spotlessly white. It looked like a jade mountain, causing people to be incomparably shocked. In the blink of an eye, the mountain changed once more. It was like a mountain formed from clouds. It was truly a spectacle. Even Xiao Yang felt incomparably shocked in his heart. This flowing cloud world was truly incomparably mysterious, and there were truly too many hidden things. Soon after, Xiao Yang let out a low cry and plunged into the enormous mountain of clouds, disappearing without a trace. At the same time, something major happened in Borealis City. It was something that caught everyone by surprise. Xiao Man had been taking care of the unconscious young master the entire time. However, in a daze, she saw her young master turn into clouds and vanish very quickly. This sudden turn of events caused Xiaoman to be even more astonished. She truly couldn't understand what was going on. Xiaoman had tried to stop the clouds from dispersing as well, but she was unable to do anything in the end. Even when she used everything she had, she could only watch as everything happened. She was unable to do anything. Two streams of tears constantly flowed down her cheeks. She blamed herself and her heart ached. How could she not blame herself for the fact that her young master had been stolen right under her nose? In a daze, Xiaoman also thought of the two great experts from the gods' world. She charged out like a madwoman, only to find the King and the Qin King sitting together, drinking tea and playing chess. They seemed very relaxed, as if they had not done anything suspicious at all. "Miss Xiaoman, why are you so flustered? Or is Xiaoyang awake?" the King asked doubtfully. Hearing this, Shen Wushuang immediately jumped up. His eyes were filled with anticipation. Xiaoman hesitated for a moment, then said, "The young master's body has disappeared." As soon as she said that, the Qin King and the King were stunned. How was that possible? Shen Wushuang was even more shocked. He really could not understand what had happened. This was truly hard to believe. In the next moment, the Qin King and the King appeared in Xiaoyang's bedroom in a flash. When they began to investigate, they did not find any clues at all. The two kings of the gods' world could be said to be the strongest experts in the 3,000 small worlds. However, at this moment they looked at each other. Their eyes were filled with confusion and confusion. Not to mention the fact that the Northern Light City was protected by the Heavenly Circulation Formation. The two martial emperors were sitting right here, less than 100 feet away from each other. How could Xiaoyang's body have been stolen so silently? It would not be an exaggeration to say that this place was right under their noses. How was it possible that he had disappeared so mysteriously? If the other party was not a few levels higher than them, it would be impossible for them to do it so quietly. However, in the 3,000 small worlds, the Emperor God's level was the highest. He was far away in the God's world. Naturally, he could not have done such a thing. Could it be that there was some old monster hiding in the 3,000 small worlds who had an extremely high cultivation level? The more they thought about it, the more shocked they became. If that was really the case, then the gods' world was really narrow-minded. However, this was also normal. The 3,000 small worlds were so huge. It was normal for there to be powerful existences in certain places. "Miss Xiaoman, what happened?" The King quickly calmed down and asked. Xiaoman, on the other hand, told them everything she saw. After the two kings heard this, they looked at each other in dismay. Now they were truly at their wits' end. Everything that had happened was indeed difficult for them to accept. Moreover, it was too bizarre. They could not figure it out at all and did not know what to do. "How could this be?" the King said and began to ponder. After all, everything that had happened was too strange. Could it be that he had overlooked something? Unrivaled God sat on the ground in despair. They had thought that there was still a glimmer of hope. However, now that even Xiaoyang's body had disappeared, what else could they do? It was as if everything was already destined. No one could change it. It was extremely frustrating. "I'll ask Mu Yang," the Qin Emperor said and disappeared from where he was. Since they did not notice anything happening, perhaps Mu Yang, who was controlling the heavenly cycle sequencing formation, could sense something. However, after the Qin Emperor found Mu Yang, the result made him feel even more helpless. However, Mu Yang mentioned a detail. There was a moment when he felt like he had been spied on. At that time, the Qin Emperor was stunned. He thought that the two Almighties were just joking, so he did not pay much attention to it. However, he had never thought that it would cause such a huge mess. This news began to quickly spread among the upper echelons of Northern Light City. Immediately, everyone was moved. Under Sun Dishing's arrangement, The upper echelons were dispatched quickly. They began to search the entire drifting cloud realm. As for the Qin Emperor and the King, they went to the Devil Realm and the Monster Realm, respectively. If necessary, they would even go to the Dark Fighting Realm and the Tinher Realm. The Devil Realm was the only one who had a feud with the Drifting Cloud Realm. They were the most suspicious. Therefore, perhaps they were the main culprits. On this point, they had no choice but to be on guard. After the news spread, North Light City was in an uproar. Everyone was like ants on a hot pan. They were extremely anxious and were still searching with all their might. However, no matter how high their cultivation base was and how many methods they used, the results were extremely disappointing. Xiaoyang seemed to have evaporated into thin air. No matter how carefully they searched, they could not find any trace of him. This miraculous event caused many people to be shocked and helpless. They couldn't find a reason for it. Chapter 2055. After Xiaoyang entered the secret realm, all of his senses were cut off. He stood on the ground and looked at the pure white sky and surroundings. His heart became extremely calm. This place was like a paradise. It was enough to make one's heart become extremely peaceful. It was as if all the disturbances had vanished into thin air and no longer existed. The surroundings could be said to be ordinary at a glance. He had also tried to sense the outside, but everything was cut off, which made him feel rather helpless. This secret realm even seemed to have a bit of bird song and the fragrance of flowers. It was extremely peaceful. It was completely different from what the heart of the world had revealed. In the blink of an eye, everything Xiaoyang saw around him began to change at an extremely fast speed. Everything that had been incomparably beautiful turned into purgatory in an instant. There was barren black soil and some charred wood everywhere. Occasionally, there would even be some chilling winds that would blow past, causing people to unconsciously tighten their clothes in an attempt to resist the attacks of the chilling winds. However, the chilling winds could not be stopped at all. They constantly attacked Xiaoyang's body. In that instant, his expression changed drastically. At this moment, his face could be said to have become incomparably ferocious. For a moment, it could even be said that he was grimacing in pain. These winds were like incomparably sharp blades, constantly slicing his body. In the next moment, Xiaoyang growled. He wanted to gather his will and use his own strength to resist the chilling winds. However, Xiaoyang's actions were completely useless. He could not change the situation before him. Incomparably, clear pain spread throughout his body. "What's going on?" Xiaoyang said in great shock. His strength seemed to have completely dissipated, and he could not use it at all. This made Xiaoyang feel even more helpless. "You don't need to try anymore. Only your soul is here. Naturally, you can't use the strength of your body." At this moment, the heart of the world gave Xiaoyang an answer. Immediately, Xiaoyang felt extremely helpless. If that was the case, then his divine soul was strong enough and he could still use some tricks. However, after a few attempts, Xiaoyang also ended in failure. Because his soul was also suppressed by this world, it was not an easy task to change it. Even his spiritual energy was suppressed. He was like a fish on a chopping board, waiting to be slaughtered. Countless chilly winds continued to sweep over him. The pain that came from the depths of his soul caused his entire body to tremble involuntarily. So what if his spiritual energy was powerful enough? Under the deliberate suppression of this world, he couldn't resist at all. In fact, he could only forcefully endure it. Soon, Xiaoyang also accepted this reality. Since he couldn't resist, he could only accept it silently. And in Xiaoyang's opinion, this was still a great thing. After all, since this cold wind directly attacked one's soul, it was not a bad idea to use it to train one's soul. Moreover, the World Core had already said that if he could pass these tests, he would benefit greatly. If that was the case, then all of this would make sense. Currently, Xiaoyang was in so much pain that he wished he was dead, but he still gritted his teeth and persevered. However, not long after, Xiao Yang trembled in so much pain that he couldn't stand at all. He directly collapsed to the ground and continued to twitch. The chilly winds did not show mercy because of Xiao Yang's collapse. Instead, they became even more violent, and their attacks became even more ferocious. Such an attack caused Xiao Yang to be in so much pain that he wished he was dead. However, he did not have any thoughts of killing himself or giving up. The World Court didn't say anything else to Xiao Yang and fell silent once more. If there was a need to explain, it would naturally explain. However, there were some things that did not need to be explained in such detail. I'm afraid that even if I were to be cut into 1,000 pieces, it would still be the same. Xiao Yang bitterly laughed as he muttered. It could be said that Xiao Yang's current situation was not as simple as cutting him to pieces. The pain of the soul was countless times greater than that of the physical body. In fact, many people's souls were so weak that they would not be able to withstand a few blows before their souls would directly collapse and disappear from this world. The chilly winds were like the howls of evil spirits that wanted to claim one's life. Even though Xiao Yang's soul was strong enough, under the attack of the chilly winds, it gradually began to show signs of dissipation. When he saw that his soul was actually starting to show signs of dissipation, Xiao Yang could not help but feel even more shocked. Could it be that this was a sure-kill situation? If you can't bear it, you can give up. These words appeared in Xiao Yang's mind while he was still in shock. His originally wavering state of mind became incomparably resolute at this moment. It was just pain, so how could he not bear it? Since it was a test, he had to persevere even if he had to grind his teeth to pieces. Of course, with Xiao Yang's current state, he could not grind his teeth to pieces at all because he was only a soul now. However, Xiao Yang did not sit and wait for death. Instead, he began to guard his heart with all his might and maintain his soul so that it would not dissipate too quickly under the chilly winds. In fact, he was even more unwilling to see his soul show any signs of dissipation. After all, once the soul dissipated and the hole was too big, it was very likely that an uncontrollable situation would occur in the end. At that time, what he would have to face would be the destruction of his soul. Xiao Yang was still very clear about which was more important. Such a test could be said to not only be withstanding, but also how to condense his soul so that it would not dissipate was also extremely important. As time passed, under such torture, Xiao Yang began to become numb to the pain. His soul also began to become a little dazed because of the pain, as if he was about to fall asleep again. However, Xiao Yang's willpower was incomparably firm. He knew very well that if he fell asleep this time, his soul would probably be destroyed in the end. At that time, no matter what kind of almighty person, they would not be able to bring him back to life and save Xiao Yang's life. Gradually, Xiao Yang's willpower became incomparably firm, like an unshakable mountain, and his soul became stronger because of this, no longer dissipated. Chapter 2056. The chilly wind was like a knife, constantly slicing Xiao Yang's body. This feeling was extremely uncomfortable. It was as if thousands of ants were gnawing at his heart. However, Xiao Yang's willpower was extremely strong. At the same time, he also realized that this trial required more than just the toughness of his spirit. It was more of a test of his willpower. If he could persevere, there would not be any problems. After an unknown period of time, Xiao Yang's last trace of consciousness was about to be obliterated. However, a refreshing feeling continuously flowed into his body. At this moment, he could not help but feel refreshed. This comfortable feeling almost made him grin from ear to ear. Endless white smoke continuously flowed into Xiao Yang's spirit at this moment, mending the slightly damaged parts of his spirit. At the same time, it was also nourishing and mending him. After a short while, the pain dissipated. At this moment, he felt extremely refreshed and comfortable. Xiao Yang stood up and moved a little. He felt that his spirit was filled with power. Xiao Yang was not in a hurry. Instead, he waited leisurely. As for what the next trial in this secret realm would be, he was very curious about it. Now that his spiritual soul had been strengthened by quite a bit, what benefits would he obtain next? Although this secret realm was said to be a training, it was more of a gift to the future owner of this world, allowing him to continuously become stronger under such circumstances. The World Core did not immediately give Xiaoyang a hint, so he was not in a hurry. Instead, he was very patient. At the same time, he also felt that his spirit was constantly being nourished. Presumably, if this nourishment did not end, then the next test would naturally not appear. He enjoyed this kind of time very much and felt very comfortable. However, the good times did not last long. Suddenly, Xiaoyang's expression became very ugly. The sudden pain almost made him collapse. "I have placed your body in the Earth's core and used fire to refine it." At this moment, the World Core gave Xiaoyang an answer and informed him of the situation he was facing. Although Xiaoyang's spirit had already left his body, the connection was not severed. Once his body was injured, he would also feel pain. The pain of being burned made Xiaoyang feel as if his spirit was in a sea of fire. It was extremely uncomfortable. Xiaoyang gritted his teeth and said, "Then what will happen in the next trial?" "The second gift is to help you refine your body," the World Core replied. Hearing this, Xiaoyang simply no longer cared about this. Instead, he lay on the ground and silently endured everything. After all, he had endured all the pain of his spirit before. What was the pain that appeared now compared to him? Therefore, his will was also very firm. As for how long this period of time would last, time slowly passed and Northern Light City could be said to be in a complete uproar. King Qin and King Da went to the demon world and the demon world respectively, but they were unable to find any traces of Xiaoyang. They had even paid a visit to the top battle powers of these two worlds. None of them were as powerful as Xiaoyang, so how could he steal someone from under their noses? As for the profound Dou world and the Tianhe world, they had no intention of investigating. After all, there were no martial emperors in these two worlds. Not to mention that they would not be able to get past Muyang, they did not even have the ability to approach Xiaoyang's residence. However, Chun Mingho, the Baldy, and the others led everyone to search everywhere, but there was no news at all. They could not find any clues. Everyone gathered in Xiaoyang's courtyard gloomily. They looked at each other, but there was nothing they could do. The current Xiaoyang seemed to have evaporated into thin air. However, he couldn't find any clues as to where he was at all. This was especially true for King Qin and King Da. From their point of view, to be able to change a living person under the noses of two martial emperors without them noticing, how high of a cultivation did one have to be able to do that? The more they thought about it, the more pessimistic they felt. If their opponents were really much stronger than them, then what kind of terrifying existence would they be? Perhaps even the structure of the entire small world would change greatly because of this. At this moment, everyone had different guesses in their hearts, but none of them were able to form a basic framework. It was like a heavenly steed soaring across the sky, causing people to feel helpless and unable to understand. However, King Da thought of another possibility. When Xiaoyang first met the Divine Emperor, he had said that he had a master with an extremely high cultivation. Could it be that his master had sensed his danger, so he had taken him away with a large sum of money? Although this idea made sense, it was only a guess. Right now, King Da and King Qin, the two martial emperors, were extremely helpless. They had never expected things to develop so quickly. It was unbelievable. In fact, they even felt that it was inconceivable. "Seniors, is there really no other way?" Sun Dishing asked, unwilling to give up. It could be said that the backbone of the entire drifting cloud world was Xiaoyang. If he was gone, the unity of the drifting cloud world would probably collapse very quickly. At that time, the conflict of interests between the sects would probably become even more intense. King Qin and King Da shook their heads. They did not know what was going on. So how could they dare to speak carelessly? What annoyed them the most was that Xiaoyang's aura had already disappeared without a trace. How were they going to investigate this matter? As for the clues that Mu Yang had mentioned before, they had no idea where to start. In the room, Xiao Man was already sobbing. She looked extremely haggard, and she did not look like a fifth-level expert like King Wuodao. She looked like a weak girl. Even the almighty figures of the god realm were helpless. Little Man was only a servant girl, so what could she do? However, Xiao Man still blamed herself. If she had reacted earlier and asked the god realm's experts to intervene, then the young master would not have been taken away. Don't worry. Xiao Man suddenly saw 4 white words appear on the bed. Chapter 2057. When Xiao Man saw the 4 words, she was stunned. It was obvious that someone was sending her a message. However, she couldn't see through what was true and what was false. Instead, it was the 2 almighties from the god realm outside who might be able to see some clues. However, when Xiao Man opened her mouth, the 4 words quickly dissipated like mist. In the blink of an eye, they turned into nothingness. After seeing this scene, the girl was completely dumbfounded. She had never seen such extravagance before. Moreover, all of this could be said to have been done without anyone noticing. The other party probably wanted her to know. That was why they revealed such a piece of information to her. Xiao Man couldn't be sure of the accuracy of the information, so she hurriedly ran out. Everyone was surprised to see Xiao Man lose her composure and act so rashly. When the Duke of Qin saw this girl's extremely haggard appearance, he felt very helpless in his heart. It was such a blessing to have such a servant girl. Xiao Man, is there anything new? Old Master Xiao asked anxiously. This girl had always been dignified. Only her young master could make her lose her composure like this. Therefore, it wasn't difficult for old Master Xiao to deduce that there was probably some new information. That was why this girl was acting like this. When everyone present heard old Master Xiao's words, they all quivered. If it was really as old Master Xiao said, once there was new information, they might be able to make new progress. It was even possible that they might be able to save Xiaoyang. Although such a chance was very slim and almost impossible to achieve, sometimes it was still hope. Just now, that strange white cloud appeared again. However, it only said, "Don't worry about anything." Xiao Man also truthfully told the news she received. King De and Qin Wang were stunned for a moment. The 2 of them looked at each other and smiled helplessly. They had been guarding this place the entire time, but they didn't notice anything strange. As for the person who did it, how brilliant was that? Even their eyes were deceived. Thinking of this, the 2 almighties felt uncomfortable in their hearts. If that was the case, then their presence here would be akin to mere decorations. Are there any other details? Unrivaled God asked anxiously. Xiao Man helplessly shook her head and said, "When I wanted to call out to you, the white cloud dispersed." As soon as these words came out, everyone instantly became a lot more dispirited. They originally thought that there would be new developments in this matter, but now it seemed that they were just overthinking things. Things had once again returned to the starting point. It was as if they were walking on the same spot. The Duke of Qin, in particular, was filled with rage. In his opinion, he had been completely fooled. Even now, he still had no idea who had done it. King De was still at a loss. The current situation was truly unfathomable. What exactly was going on, no one could say for sure. Therefore, they could only continue to wait. Unrivaled God was even more desperate. He had read a lot in the God realm and traveled around the outside world. Naturally, he had seen a lot. Looking at his father's worried face, it was not difficult to imagine what kind of situation they were in now. Sun Dishing smiled bitterly and said, "Since Lord Xiao is safe and sound, then we don't have to worry anymore." Everyone nodded in agreement, but they didn't agree in their hearts. They all knew that the unknown opponent had yet to show up, and there was not a single word leaked. Under such ignorance, they felt terrified. Of course, they also understood that Sun Dishing said this to stabilize their morale so that they wouldn't fall into chaos first. After fire forging, Xiao Yang's entire body felt as if it had been struck by lightning. He didn't need to think to know that Lu Yun was using lightning to refine his body. It was not easy to upgrade one's physical body to a higher level. Moreover, Xiao Yang's body was already comparable to King Wu's peak level. How could it be easy to improve it to a higher level? At the very least, this was not something that could be done in a short period of time. Xiao Yang was not worried about these refinement methods at all. He trusted the heart of the world very much. Since their fates were about to be tied together, it was naturally impossible for the other party to hurt him. It might even do its best to refine his body to make it even more perfect. The intense pain that came from time to time was only a matter of time for him to grit his teeth and endure it. It was not too difficult. Xiao Yang replayed his battle with Han Jingming while enduring the pain that came from time to time. The battle with a martial emperor powerhouse was still very beneficial for the current Xiao Yang. Soon, Xiao Yang finished replaying the battle. He also found his chance of victory. Firstly, Han Jingming was too complacent. He felt that as a martial emperor, he could easily crush his opponents. As long as they were not at the same level, he was invincible. Therefore, he underestimated his opponent and gave Xiao Yang a chance. Secondly, Xiao Yang was in the drifting cloud realm. It could be said that he had taken advantage of the right time, place, and people. The activation of the heavenly circulation formation was the best proof. Of course, it was also because of the hearts of the people. Thirdly, it was because Xiao Yang treated the drifting cloud realm well. In addition, because of the hearts of the people, the heart of the world acted at the crucial moment when he was about to turn the situation around. It was because of the power of the entire drifting cloud realm that he was able to slash out with his sword and completely settle the battle. It could be said that the last part was the most important. If it wasn't for the timely help that gave him the ability to kill a martial emperor, no matter how many plans he had and how precise everything was, he would have failed at the last moment. As for Han Jingming's death, it was no coincidence that he had died. Even though he was a martial emperor powerhouse, it was still very difficult for him to forcefully destroy a world with a heart of the world. After reviewing all of this, Xiao Yang felt much more comfortable in his heart. However, he suddenly felt as if his body had fallen into an ice cave. Xiao Yang was trembling from the cold. He muttered, "It seems that they are really unscrupulous." There were many ways to refine one's body. However, whether they were effective or not depended on whether they could be put to good use. Moreover, no matter what method it was, there were benefits. As for the disadvantages, it depended on whether one could endure them. If one could not endure them, then they were disadvantages. Chapter 2058. Xiao Yang didn't find this strange. As for what methods the World Core would use to deal with him, he wouldn't find it strange at all. Although it was inevitable that he would be abused, as long as he could increase his strength, what did it matter? Moreover, he didn't have to do anything now. He just had to lie here and enjoy everything. That was enough. Therefore, sometimes it was meaningless to think too much about it. The pain that came from time to time caused Xiao Yang's expression to change. Next, he felt the pain of his body being pierced and pulled, and he even felt a bit numb. Evidently, the World Core had used its poisonous vines to whip him, which was why such a situation had occurred. Xiao Yang had completely given himself to the World Core, and he didn't have any ability to resist. As such, he could only endure it. As for what the final effect would be, that was unknown. After all, he would only know what would happen after witnessing it with his own eyes. Immediately after, Xiao Yang felt pain again. It was as if his injured body had been placed in medicine, and it was extremely painful. However, Xiao Yang soon felt an extremely comfortable feeling. It was unknown just how many natural treasures had been placed in the medicinal liquid. Some of them even contained some of the World Core's reserves. They were meant to completely heal Xiao Yang's injuries and strengthen his body. The World Core couldn't do anything when it saw that this young man was enjoying himself. However, it had observed Xiao Yang for a long time and naturally understood his nature. As long as he didn't involve himself in certain matters, he would mostly be sloppy and didn't need to care about anything. However, when it thought about how much it had invested this time, it couldn't help but feel a bit of heartache. If this selection failed again, it would probably fall into that bottomless abyss again. Xiao Yang didn't know anything about the World Core's thoughts. Moreover, he didn't have the time to think about this right now. After all, the thoughts of this kind of spiritual being had always been very strange. After a long time, Xiao Yang immediately stood up because he saw his own body appear in front of him. When he saw himself suddenly appear, he was still shocked. This was too sudden, and he was not prepared at all. Fuse! Hearing this, Xiao Yang's spirit immediately returned to its original position and returned to his physical body. However, because his soul had been away from his body for too long, it seemed somewhat out of place. There was even some slight rejection. Fortunately, he had left a part of his soul in his body to act as a medium, so he didn't encounter too many problems. When Xiao Yang began to move his body again, he seemed to be very clumsy. He was like a child who had just started to walk. There was a sense of helplessness. Perhaps it was because his spirit had left his body for too long, causing him to not be very familiar with his own body. However, as he continued to move around, he quickly adapted to his body. Under his perception, he also discovered that his body had been improved by a level under the refinement of the World Core. It had become extremely tyrannical. Under the continuous refinement, his body had become even more resilient. Whether he could be considered to have reached that level was unknown. However, he could feel that the original injury, coupled with the backlash of the medicinal power, had been completely resolved. There weren't even any sequelae left behind. Even a lot of the impurities in his body had been removed. His entire body had become much more agile, and his perception had become sharper. After feeling that his body had become stronger, Xiao Yang smiled in satisfaction. This trip to the secret realm had strengthened both his spirit and his body. This could be said to be a great thing, and it made him very satisfied. As for when he could have hope of breaking through to that level, it was hard to say. Thank you very much. Xiao Yang immediately straightened his face and said in an extremely sincere manner. Although Xiao Yang could rely on his own cultivation to become stronger, who knew how much time it would take? Moreover, it wasn't easy to remove the impurities in his body by himself. Even though he had countless methods in his mind, it was still a long process. Without 100 years, it would be difficult to reach this state. It could be said that with the help of the World Core, Xiao Yang was 100 years ahead of others. These 100 years were enough to change a lot of things. Defeat him. A thought suddenly appeared in Xiao Yang's mind. When he looked up, he saw an extremely valiant man standing there. This man was formed from white clouds, and he quickly transformed into an extremely extraordinary general wearing heavy armor. The burly man quickly seemed to become corporeal, like a living person, but he didn't have the aura of a living person. When Xiao Yang saw this, he was very surprised. The World Core was actually able to create such a puppet. This kind of ability could be said to be quite extraordinary. Before Xiao Yang could make a move, the puppet directly charged over. It was like a raging bull, unstoppable. When Xiao Yang saw this, he immediately counterattacked. He wanted to dodge, but he found that his hands and feet were heavy, and his divine abilities seemed to have been completely sealed. He couldn't use them at all. Because of this moment of hesitation, Xiao Yang had completely lost the initiative. At this moment, the puppet's fist directly bombarded Xiao Yang's head. Immediately, Xiao Yang was sent flying. He saw stars and his mind was in a daze. You can play like this? Xiao Yang cursed in his heart and immediately stood up. Even if he only used the strength of his physical body, he believed that it wouldn't be difficult to defeat the puppet in front of him. Therefore, in his opinion, it was still possible. It wasn't difficult. However, just as Xiao Yang stood up, another fist bombarded his chest. He couldn't resist at all and immediately staggered back. The puppet didn't seem to have the slightest emotion or thought. It continued to charge forward. The mountain-like fist was raised again and continued to fall. When this fist landed, Xiao Yang immediately felt pain. He couldn't resist it all and continued to be forced back. Now, Xiaoyang could be said to be incomparably sullen. He was being suppressed and beaten. Chapter 2059. That puppet also had an unforgiving appearance. It could be said that it had gained the upper hand by attacking first. At the same time, it didn't seem to know the concept of exhaustion. Its fists continued to land without any hesitation. Xiaoyang's heart was filled with helplessness. Being beaten up by this puppet could be said to be a complete mess. In fact, he even found it difficult to control his own body. In such a passive situation, Xiaoyang could be said to be unable to retaliate and could only take the beating. This wasn't because Xiaoyang was too weak or because the heart of the world was too strong. It was because this was the heart of the world's territory. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that this place was its territory, regardless of whether it was the ability of the physical body or the methods of cultivation. They were all suppressed. Right now, Xiaoyang was no different from an ordinary person. Therefore, it was not surprising that he was constantly being beaten up by the other party's domain. The intense pain quickly engulfed Xiaoyang's nerves, and he felt extremely helpless in his heart. How did he end up in such a situation? The puppet didn't want him to pass the test. That was why it was suppressing him like this. Xiaoyang could feel that the strength of the puppet's fists was close to that of a martial emperor. However, he couldn't use any magic. Wasn't he just taking a beating? Who asked this to be the heart of the world's territory? Although Xiaoyang was dissatisfied and cursed in his heart, he could only endure it. He didn't believe that he couldn't find a chance to fight back. Even if some of his physical strength was sealed, it didn't matter. After all, he still had strength comparable to the peak of the 9th rank. The fact that he could still withstand the bombardment of these fists was the best proof. However, all of this wasn't as simple as it seemed. The puppet's fists continued to bombard Xiaoyang without the slightest pause. It did not even give Xiaoyang any chance to counterattack. It continued to suppress Xiaoyang to the point that Xiaoyang could not even control his own body. It could be said that under the control of the world core, the puppet was like a machine that calculated everything very clearly. The strength of each punch could be said to be just right, making it so that Xiaoyang could withstand it, but also so that he would always be in a state where he couldn't store up power. Even if he had a chance to accumulate power, it would be immediately interrupted by the ferocious fists. After trying a few times, Xiaoyang gave up. The puppet continued to bombard him as if it was letting him hit it. Of course, Xiaoyang wasn't a fool. He couldn't just take the beating. This was because he could feel that every time he received a punch, the compatibility between his divine soul and his physical body would increase by a lot. Evidently, Xiaoyang couldn't completely control his spirit because it had been a long time since his spirit left his body. Everything the puppet did was to help him achieve compatibility in the shortest time possible. Xiaoyang even felt that there were other miraculous effects. Some parts of his bones and tendons that were not flowing smoothly had also started to undergo some subtle changes. Even the spiritual meridians in his body had also received a significant benefit. The arrangement of Xiaoyang's spiritual veins was different from that of ordinary people. He had 4 spiritual veins in his limbs to strengthen his strength. However, there were also some disadvantages to this. It caused his limbs to be constantly in a state of high tension because they were filled with power. It was like draining the pond to catch all the fish. Although draining the pond to catch all the fish would only appear at least 10,000 years later, it was still a hidden danger in the end. The world core had previously refined Xiaoyang's spirit and physical body separately. Now, it naturally wanted to fuse them together to make them even more perfect. This could be said to have put in a lot of effort. It wanted to make the person it formed a contract with even more perfect. The two of them were closely related. The flowing cloud realm's fate was connected to Xiaoyang, so the world core naturally wanted him to become even stronger. In this way, the flowing cloud realm would also benefit greatly from this. It could be said that after forming a contract, they were mutually beneficial. The world core's thoughts were very simple. It wanted Xiaoyang to become even stronger. However, when the world core discovered that Xiaoyang didn't resist and instead looked like he was enjoying the beating, it became somewhat angry. Therefore, it secretly increased its strength in the next few punches, hitting Xiaoyang until his limbs and bones trembled. It's got a temper. Xiaoyang cursed in his heart. At the same time, he began to ponder. As expected, the world core was quite strange. At the very least, it was sentient and had emotions. In this way, it made Xiaoyang even more puzzled. The flowing cloud realm was a broken, small world. No matter how he looked at it, the things that the world core had shown him weren't things that could be born in a broken, small world. As for the records of the flowing cloud world, there were only records from the past 10,000 years. As for those 10,000 years ago, they were extremely rare. As for the reason why there was a gap, it was because a great battle had broken out in the flowing cloud realm 10,000 years ago. In that great battle, countless almighty beings had died. Even many ancient books had been lost at that time. It was also because of that great battle that the flowing cloud realm's vitality was greatly damaged, which opened the chapter of being invaded by the demon realm. Then, what was the flowing cloud realm like before that great battle? How powerful was it? However, this didn't make sense. After all, if the flowing cloud realm was strong enough, then the god realm would naturally have records of it. And when he reported his name, it was obvious that he didn't know about it. After taking an unknown number of punches, Xiaoyang fell to the ground, and the puppet stopped attacking. Although Xiaoyang's limbs and bones were in pain, he felt extremely happy in his heart. It was as if a blocked area had been completely opened up, and everything had become smooth. This was naturally something that made him incomparably happy. Following that, the white clouds turned into wisps of mist and continuously surged into Xiaoyang's body. It looked as if 100 rivers were flowing into the sea, and it was endless. Xiaoyang didn't resist. Instead, he calmly accepted it. He knew that this was a gift from the world core. This was also an extraordinary existence, and it was extremely beneficial to him. If he could completely absorb it, he might really have the confidence to break through to the next realm. Everything could be accomplished without a hitch. Chapter 2060. After an unknown amount of time, the white mist finally completely merged into Xiaoyang's body. Instantly, Xiaoyang felt refreshed, and his consciousness became incomparably clear. Everything changed in his eyes. Beneath the desolation, there was a vast grassland that stretched as far as the eye could see. However, just as Xiaoyang was about to continue looking, he absent-mindedly appeared high up in the sky. At this moment, his suppressed body and consciousness were completely restored. I didn't expect it to be so stingy. I can't even take a look. Xiaoyang laughed bitterly and self-deprecatingly. However, Xiaoyang had experienced the nature of the world core in the mystic realm. Therefore, no matter what it did, it wouldn't be surprising. Xiaoyang felt very helpless about the world core's unreasonable behavior. He also wanted to understand more about this companion that was connected to him. However, the world core was like ice and didn't give him a chance at all. However, Xiaoyang didn't care too much about this, since he could form a contract with the world core and connect their fates together. There would naturally be plenty of opportunities to understand it in the future. He wasn't in a hurry to do so now. When he came out, Xiaoyang felt that the energy in his body was incomparably abundant. To what extent was it plentiful? Just like how water overflowed when it was full, he didn't want this energy to overflow and even suppressed it. However, this method was very dangerous. If he wasn't careful, his body might burst open. This was a gift from the world core. Xiaoyang was naturally unwilling to let it overflow just like that. Therefore, at this moment, he immediately made an extremely bold move, and that was to directly condense the sixth spirit meridian. This idea could be said to be incomparably crazy. Now, Xiaoyang was like a madman. He started his own action without the slightest hesitation. In an instant, not only did he not release the spiritual energy, but he also started to madly absorb it. Soon enough, the place where he was at became like a vortex. Spiritual qi surged wildly, forming a small phenomenon. As Muyang was in charge of the heavenly cycle array, he quickly sensed the powerful spirit energy fluctuation. He looked up and saw the spirit energy whirlpool. He was shocked to be able to cause such a huge fluctuation of spirit qi. One could imagine how terrifying this person's cultivation was. In fact, even when Muyang had broken through to the peak of the 9th stage, such a commotion had not occurred. All of a sudden, the answer in Muyang's heart was on the verge of being revealed. Could it be that he had returned? Because of the distance, Muyang did not act rashly and continued to guard North Light City. As for the actual situation over there would naturally be people who would investigate. Before Muyang could send the message back, the 3 figures had already dashed over in a flash. Seeing this, Muyang was no longer worried. Since there were almighty people from the realm of the gods going over to investigate, he naturally did not need to worry too much. It's been 3 months. Xiaoyang! Oh, Xiaoyang, I only hope that you have returned. Muyang laughed bitterly and returned to his original position. Immediately after, Chun Mingho, the Baldy, and the others also rushed out one after another, heading towards the location of the strange phenomenon. As time passed, the phenomenon and the pull of spirit qi became stronger and stronger. Even they could feel it, whether the city lord had returned or if someone had come to steal the fate of the flowing cloud realm. They had to check it out. Of course, more than anything, they hoped that it was the former. After Chun Mingho and Baldy arrived, they realized that the guests from the realm of the gods were not moving. They had complicated expressions on their faces, so they did not act rashly. Haha, I knew that this kid did not disappoint us. He is back, Qin Wang said excitedly. De Wang smiled and nodded. He naturally saw through the spirit energy whirlpool and saw the person who was causing such a commotion. Now, they did not need to say anything. They already knew in their hearts that he was back. The city lord of the flowing cloud realm had appeared again after disappearing mysteriously for 3 months. Next to them, Unrivaled God was extremely excited. He had a strong friendship with Xiaoyang. Now that his friend had returned, he was naturally happy. Chun Mingho and Baldy looked at each other and smiled. As long as their boss was back, everything would be fine. It could be said that the current Xiaoyang was like a stabilizing needle. As long as he was around, the flowing cloud realm would be safe and sound. The hearts of the people in this realm would become extremely firm because of this. Such a huge commotion. Is he about to break through to the level of a martial emperor? Qin Wang said suddenly, a little shocked. De Wang's eyes were filled with confusion. As one of the few powerhouses in the 3,000 small worlds, he was extremely sensitive to the fate of the flowing cloud realm. The martial emperor's fate had been occupied long ago. Even after Han Jingming's death, Princess Mingzhu immediately occupied the slot. And now, could it be that another martial emperor had fallen? However, when he thought about it carefully, most of the martial emperors were in the deity realm and their lives were not in danger. As for the Sword Heart realm and the Sun Snow realm, the 2 of them still had a lifespan of close to 10,000 years. How could they have died? As a result, the king really couldn't figure out what was going on. Something's not right. He's not breaking through to the level of a martial emperor, De Wang said suddenly. The Duke of Qin also saw the clues and nodded in agreement. If he was really breaking through to the level of a martial emperor, the heavenly vision would be even more powerful. Good lad, he's actually condensing the 6th spiritual meridian. Qin Wang used a little divine power and observed. He was also shocked. Now, they could finally understand why Xiaoyang could challenge Han Jingming. 5 spiritual meridians. That was impressive. Even Princess Mingzhu's peak was 5 spiritual meridians. Now, Xiaoyang had condensed the 6th spiritual meridian. This person was a little too terrifying. At the same time, they knew very well that as long as one was talented, one could condense the 6th spiritual meridian. However, if one wanted to break through to the level of a martial emperor, the more spiritual meridian one condensed, the more difficult it would be. This was also the reason why they thought that Xiaoyang was crazy. Such an approach was truly reckless. However, Xiaoyang was at a critical moment, and they did not dare to interfere. They might cause him to go berserk. After an hour, the heavenly vision disappeared, and Xiaoyang had successfully condensed the spiritual meridian. Chapter 2061. After successfully condensing the sixth spiritual meridian, Xiaoyang felt a lot more comfortable, now that he had the support of the World Core. Even without the assistance of the World Core, he still had the ability to face off against an opponent like Han Jingming in the drifting cloud world. Then, Xiaoyang stopped thinking about these things. He cupped his hands at King Qin and King Da and said, "Xiaoyang greets the two seniors." Xiaoyang had received a lot of care in King Da's residence. Therefore, he had always respected King Da, who was his senior. Even though he had now become the true master of the flowing cloud world, he still had such a respectful heart. "Good lad. Congratulations. You've actually condensed your sixth spiritual vein." Qin Wang laughed heartily. Xiaoyang only smiled and nodded without replying. "Xiaoyang, where have you been these days?" King Da asked. It could be said that in the 3 months that Xiaoyang had disappeared, the entire flowing cloud world was about to fall into chaos. At the same time as people of the God Realm, they were also very concerned about this junior. However, because they could not figure out what was going on, they could only wait. As the 3 months passed, King Da wanted to carry out his plan. He wanted to help some of the geniuses in the flowing cloud world and teach them before returning to the God Realm. However, he did not expect that just as he was hesitating, he would appear. King Qin also looked at him anxiously. He also wanted to know what Xiaoyang had experienced in this period of time. Moreover, he had condensed the sixth spiritual vein the moment he appeared. It could be said that he had broken the limit of Kingwu in the 3,000 small worlds. To be honest, I was brought to a secret realm to train. I only managed to come out today. Xiaoyang smiled. As for what secret realm it was and why, Xiaoyang naturally would not say clearly. It could also be said that the heart of the world was a secret. The fewer people who knew about it, the better. Otherwise, if some people with ulterior motives knew about it, who knew what they would do? No matter how much Xiaoyang trusted the God Realm, he wouldn't say anything. The king smiled. Naturally, he was also aware of some of the tricks involved. Even though he had many doubts in his heart, he was not prepared to continue asking. After all, there were a lot of secrets that couldn't be casually revealed. It might even be related to the foundation of a world. At this moment, Unrivaled God gave him a thumbs up and said, "I was right about you, my friend. Back then, your level had always been suppressed by mine. Now it's twice as high as mine." Due to his friend's return, Unrivaled God ignored the fact that his opponent's level was twice his own. Instead, he was genuinely happy. It could be said that Unrivaled God had been worried about Xiaoyang's safety the entire time he was here. He was afraid that something would happen to him. "You're not bad yourself. You're already at the peak of the 9th rank, a level that most people in the God Realm can't reach," Xiaoyang said. Unrivaled God thought about it and only smiled slightly. This was because his ambition had never been to reach the peak of King Wu's level. He wanted to go further, but there were only so many opportunities in the 3,000 minor worlds. No one could change that. He could only wait until he went to a broader stage before he could show his talent. Unrivaled God had a very clear understanding of himself. He was not a top genius and could not compare to people who were favored by the heavens like Ming Zhu. Therefore, he could only rely on his own efforts to go further. "Boss!" Baldi and Qin Mingho were extremely excited as well. Xiaoyang only nodded at the two of them. As far as the eye could see, the Xiao family's patriarch, Xiao Chongsheng, Chu Taiyin, Old Master, and the rest were all here. He was touched. When he realized that these people's cultivation levels had increased by a level, he was even more satisfied. The result of the battle that day was not bad. It could even be said that they had achieved a complete victory. This is not the place to talk. Let's talk after we return to the city." After some small talk, Xiaoyang gestured with his hand and made an inviting gesture as he said. Everyone walked together and returned to North Light City. When Muyang saw that Xiaoyang had returned, the Apollo Sex patriarch secretly heaved a sigh of relief and revealed a happy smile. Fortunately, it was all a false alarm. With Xiaoyang's return, everything in the drifting cloud realm would return to normal in the shortest time possible. Moreover, he would go further in the future. As for the heavy burden on his shoulders, he could also take it off. He would no longer have to live in fear day and night, constantly observing the entire drifting cloud realm in fear of an enemy invasion. On the way, Xiaoyang took out the Pisces token. When he saw that the Emperor God had sent him many messages, he only smiled. As for the luck from killing Han Jingming, Xiaoyang felt that it was a pity that Princess Ming Zhu had taken it away. However, this was normal. If Princess Ming Zhu was able to obtain it, it would not be bad. It would be too difficult for him to compete with her. Moreover, in such a situation, he was powerless to compete with her. After leaving the secret realm, Xiaoyang already felt that the luck was no longer there. Without a doubt, it must have been taken away by the God realm. After the old master, Xiao, returned to North Light City, he did not follow the others to the hall to talk. Instead, he went to Xiaoyang's house. The old master Xiao was very clear about his position. Among the group, he was the one with the worst talent. This was the best he could be in this generation. There was no need for him to get involved in these matters. On the contrary, he felt that he had to tell this news to that girl. After arriving at the house, the old master Xiao immediately found Xiaoman and told her that Xiaoyang had returned. Immediately, Xiaoman, who was originally dispirited and unable to recover from the setback, seemed to have been reborn after hearing the news. She was full of energy. "Girl, you're really rash. Xiaoyang is now talking to an important guest from the God realm. If you go now, won't you be disturbing him?" The old master, Xiao, said with a smile. Xiaoman immediately stopped in her tracks. She was not disappointed. Instead, she was like a child who had done something wrong. However, she could not hide her excitement. "Great master! Thank you for telling me this news in time," Xiaoman said playfully. The Xiao clan's great-grandfather smiled. He couldn't help but think, what a good girl. Could it be that Xiaoyang didn't know anything about this? Or could it be that he had allocated all his intelligence to his talent and cultivation, so he was lacking in the ways of the world? Xiaoman tilted her head and looked at the great master, who was deep in thought and smiling foolishly. Chapter 2062. In the Realm of the Gods. The Emperor God sat in his study. When he saw the message from the Pisces token, he immediately became excited. He knew that since the token had sent another message, it meant that the young man was still alive. However, when the divine emperor saw the 3 words, "I understand," on the token, he had mixed feelings. He did not feel the same way. He knew that these 3 words already explained a lot of emotions. Xiaoyang had risked his life to kill Han Jingming. He had seized the opportunity to kill Han Jingming, which was less than 1 in 10,000th of a chance. He had allowed the martial emperor's fate to be released, allowing him to enter. However, he did not expect that Princess Mingzhu would benefit from this. Under such circumstances, as long as it was a normal person, they would probably be somewhat dissatisfied. It was also because of Xiaoyang's reply that the Emperor God could not help but feel a little guilty. He felt that the realm of the gods was indeed a little unkind. Previously, Xiaoyang had helped the realm of the gods by breaking the Greenly realm scheme. Now, he had even snatched away the portion of luck that belonged to him. So what was the point of this? Speaking of which, he could not bear to do this. However, no one could change the fact that things had come to this. He couldn't possibly allow the God Emperor to strip his daughter of her cultivation as a martial emperor and then return her luck. After everyone returned to North Light City, Duong began to talk about the purpose of his trip. He also handed over all the things he had prepared to Xiaoyang, saying that these were his compensation. Xiaoyang did not reject these things. Instead, he accepted them all. This was because he felt that he had done the realm of the gods a great favor. He could accept these things. Moreover, these treasures were enough to increase the strength of the entire drifting cloud realm. However, one had to know that on the path of cultivation, resources were also very important. The reason why the profound fighting world was able to rise from a second-rate small world to a first-rate one was because they had plundered the resources of other worlds. Of course, the profound fighting world had suffered an even greater blow in the end because of this reason. As for the God realm and the other worlds, they didn't seek help from outsiders because they already had enough resources and didn't need to compete for them. For a place as barren as the flowing cloud world, if one wanted to rise to a higher level, they would naturally need more resources to fill the gap. King Zhao and King Qin went back to rest after they were done with their tasks. The two of them also knew that after Xiaoyang had mysteriously disappeared for so long, he must have a lot of things to deal with, so they didn't disturb him anymore. After the Almighty from the realm of the gods left, Sun Dishing began to report on his gains and losses after the battle with Han Jingming. The losses of the flowing cloud world this time were mostly caused by the shockwaves of the battle. It was not a small number. After Xiaoyang heard this, his heart ached. Who knows, among the dozens of King Wu's fifth-rank disciples, there might be a few existences with the same cultivation as them today. Although the reign of Providence had benefited the entire flowing cloud world, and many people had broken through to the next realm, it could be said that the overall strength of the flowing cloud world had increased by a lot. However, this still made a miser like Xiaoyang feel extremely pained. However, a person who had already passed away would naturally not be able to return. Hence, Xiaoyang could only temporarily put this matter aside. These days, I have made everyone worried. My apologies. Xiaoyang stood up and bowed apologetically. Everyone immediately stood up and said, "City Lord, your words are too serious. If it wasn't for you, how could we be where we are today?" Soon after, everyone began to speak some sincere words of courtesy. Towards this young man, they sincerely admired him. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that they were completely convinced. Xiaoyang, that portion of Providence, is it still in our flowing cloud world? After a long while, Muyang asked. This was the question that Muyang was most concerned about. After all, whether or not Xiaoyang could step into the realm of Martial King would determine whether or not they could ally with the God realm and become a middle realm together. Xiaoyang helplessly shook his head and said, "At that time, I also didn't expect that in the end it would be a wedding dress for the God realm." Hearing this, Mu Yang's expression instantly became extremely ugly. If the providence of Martial King had already been taken by someone else, then in the future, if Xiaoyang wanted to step into that realm, wouldn't he have to kill another Martial King expert? However, no matter how he looked at it, this was unrealistic. Previously, when they were able to kill Han Jingming, it could be said that they were somewhat lucky. But now, they probably wouldn't have that kind of luck again. However, Senior, you don't have to worry. The other path might work. Seeing this, Xiaoyang added. Hearing this, Muyang was instantly overjoyed. Naturally, he knew what Xiaoyang was talking about. He excitedly said, "Could it be?" However, before Muyang could finish a sentence, Xiaoyang stopped him with a look. After all, this kind of thing couldn't be said out loud. Muyang understood, so he chuckled and didn't continue speaking. He also knew that Xiaoyang had probably become the true ruler of the flowing cloud world. Then, after gathering everyone's information, Xiaoyang began to make some decisions. However, most of these were Sun Yukai and Sun Dishing's suggestions on how to make the flowing cloud world even stronger. It had to be said that these two people's abilities were indeed extraordinary. Every idea they came up with was not simple. After everything was arranged, under Sun Dishing's suggestion, they should hold the celebration banquet from 3 months ago to calm the hearts of everyone in the flowing cloud world. After all, ever since the flowing cloud world's victory, Xiaoyang hadn't shown himself. The outside world had long been filled with different opinions. Although each sect had their own almighty to calm the hearts of the people, if the ruler didn't show himself and there was no news, it was inevitable that people would think too much. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that the current flowing cloud world was in a state of panic. Xiao Yang also agreed to the suggestion and emphasized that Sun Yukai had to go into seclusion. If he couldn't break through to the 6th level of Kingwu, then he shouldn't come out of seclusion. Instantly, Sun Yukai also cried out in grief. After everything was done, it was already late at night and everyone left. That girl Xiao Man has lost a lot of weight during this period of time. She looks so haggard, it really makes one's heart ache. The Xiao family's great-grandfather walked to Xiao Yang's side and pretended to be pretentious as he said. Xiao Yang was stunned for a moment. Soon after, his expression became a lot gloomier. He bitterly laughed and said, "That girl is quite silly." Xiao clan's great-grandpa was also stunned, and the way he looked at Xiao Yang also changed. Chapter 2063. After returning home, Xiao Man threw herself into Xiao Yang's arms as soon as she saw him. For a moment, she could be said to be in tears. From this, it could be seen how worried Xiao Man was during this period of time. That was why she was like this. How could Xiao Yang not understand this friendship? It could be said that Xiao Man had been by his side and serving him along the way. After comforting her for a while, Xiao Man's emotions were appeased. After talking for a while, Xiao Man left reluctantly. Xiao Yang returned to his room and began to feel the changes in his body. Due to the 6 spiritual veins, the power in his body could be said to be surging like a river. It was very abundant. Even his entire body had become much more agile because of this. It was as if there was no more suffering that could stop him half a step. Since I don't have a fixed fate anymore, when will I be able to break through to the martial emperor realm? Xiao Yang muttered to himself, and his mood became a lot more gloomy because of this. It could be said that breaking through to the martial emperor realm had become an extremely difficult task for the current Xiao Yang. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Although he had obtained the ancient technique and was bound to the drifting cloud realm, it was not an easy task to go against the heavens. This fate was like a cake. If it was divided, it would be gone unless someone was willing to give up the cake in their hands. Obviously, no one would have such thoughts. After all, if they wanted to divide these things, they would be looking for trouble. Okay. At this moment, the heart of the world also responded to Xiao Yang. After receiving this reply, Xiao Yang's heart skipped a beat. His sudden appearance and disappearance really made him a little scared. However, after receiving the heart of the world's reply, Xiao Yang's heart became much more balanced. Since there was a way and an opportunity to break through, how could he miss such a great opportunity? If he did not try, there would never be a chance. Right now, there was still a chance of success. Although this seemed to be a very slim possibility, it was still possible. Soon after, Xiao Yang stopped thinking about these things. For many things, as long as fate was there, success would naturally follow naturally. Now that he had just condensed his 6th spiritual vein, he still needed to stabilize his cultivation base. As for the rest, he could only think about it in the future. As for the immortal realm, they didn't give Xiao Yang a reply. He didn't care about this either. The prerequisites for the alliance between the flowing cloud realm and the god realm had long been in place. If Xiao Yang could not achieve that goal, then naturally this alliance would not take effect. Since that was the case, there was no need for them to worry about anything else. Soon after, Xiao Yang began to check the items that King had given him. It had to be said that the god realm was indeed generous. The compensation this time was also not bad. Elixirs, precious weapons, and treasures of the heavens and the earth. They could be said to have everything one could wish for, and it was extremely abundant. Of course, what made Xiao Yang even more shocked was that there was actually a pseudo-spiritual vein in this compensation. This made him extremely shocked. It seemed that the god realm was really rich and overbearing. Such an incomparably precious item was given away so easily. It was really generous. Originally, Xiaoyang was still worried about how to break through to the martial emperor realm. However, now that he had the help of this pseudo-spiritual vein, at least he would have enough strength to break through. As for whether he could truly step into that realm, that was hard to say. At the very least, even Xiaoyang did not have the confidence in his heart. Such a mysterious matter, no one could be completely sure. After all, who knew what would happen next that would catch him off guard? Soon after, Xiaoyang sorted out his thoughts. With a thought, Xiao Hu appeared in front of him. After devouring Han Jingming's physical body, Xiao Hua had become even more powerful. Compared to Xiaoyang, who now had 6 spiritual veins, Xiao Hua seemed to be even more powerful. After seeing Xiaoyang, Xiao Hua quickly came over to act coquettishly and kept rubbing against his body. However, Xiaoyang was scolded by Xiao Hua and cried out in alarm. In the next moment, Xiao Hua retreated to the side like a child who had done something wrong, full of grievance. After Xiaoyang's physical body had been refined by the heart of the world, the degree of toughness was comparable to that of a martial emperor expert. However, now that he had been injured by Xiao Hua, it was not difficult to guess that Xiao Hua was probably no longer in the category of a high-level heavenly fire. Good, good, good. Xiao Yang laughed out loud in satisfaction. Now that Xiao Hua's strength had increased tremendously, he could almost run amok in the 3,000 small worlds. Even if he was facing a martial emperor expert, he would still be fearless. Of course, if it was the two of them, there was nothing they could do. Take out all the things that I asked you to leave behind, Xiaoyang said in a low voice. Little Flame nodded. Soon after, it swiftly began to spread out. A few rings and boxes were placed at the center. These were all left behind by Han Jingming. Xiaoyang did not know exactly how many treasures there were, but he was sure that the wealth of a martial royal realm expert would not be bad. Xiaoyang reached out and took all the things into his hands. Then, Xiaoyang started to take inventory of the items. Among the things that Han Jingming had left behind, they were also valuable. The things that were contained in them were dazzling and shocking. He even had more than 10 saint-grade magic tools, which showed how deep his foundation was. However, most of them were of the middle and lower grade, and there were only 2 upper-grade weapons. However, 2 upper sacred level Dharma artifacts were still precious treasures. The reason why Muyang was almost invincible in the same realm as himself was naturally because of the high saint grade artifact, the Vermilion Flame token. The power of an upper grade weapon was not to be underestimated. As for the elixirs and spiritual herbs, there were many of them, and they were all of high grade. After a careful search, Xiaoyang also found some of the skills that Han Jingming had left behind. Among them was the Heavenly Demon Curse Body. Although the Heavenly Demon Curse Body was evil, it was different from the evil skills of the dark fighting world. It could still be cultivated. You've worked hard these days. Take these and eat them, Xiaoyang said as he took out a few holy grade weapons and threw them to Xiao Hua. Chapter 2064. After receiving the compensation from the God Realm and taking inventory of the things left behind by Han Jingming, Xiaoyang could be said to have become rich overnight. Therefore, he was even more generous with his spending. Among the magic weapons that Xiao Hu devoured, there was a high-grade sage-level magic weapon. It could be seen how casual he was. After Xiao Hu swallowed those celestial treasures in one gulp, he escaped into the void to taste these delicacies. Because Xiao Hua had devoured Blackfire, he had also obtained some of Blackfire's abilities. This way, he could also devour everything to strengthen himself. The power contained within the sage-level magic weapon was also extraordinary. It was enough to increase his strength by a lot and make him even more powerful. After taking inventory of everything, it was already dawn. Xiaoyang yawned tiredly. At the same time, he already had a rough idea of how to distribute these things in his heart. After all, there were so many things, so he naturally couldn't take all of them for himself. If he was alone in the world, it wouldn't be a big deal. However, now that he had chosen to become the ruler of the Drifting Cloud realm, he naturally had to consider more for his own realm. That's right, what do you need? Where should I plant these spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs so that you can recover? Xiaoyang thought for a moment and asked. Xiaoyang was naturally asking about the world core. Furthermore, Xiaoyang had a lot to do with how they were going to improve this piece of land. Sharing honor and disgrace was just like that. Soon after, the world core allowed Xiaoyang to release his consciousness and enter the rings and boxes where the items were stored alone. After a long while, Xiaoyang also received a response from the world core. Now, Xiaoyang and the world core could be said to be telepathically connected. As long as they didn't deliberately hide anything from each other, they could tell each other what they needed. After receiving a response, Xiaoyang told Sun Dishing that he was going out for a while and would naturally return on the day of the celebratory banquet. After settling these matters, Xiaoyang brought Lil Man and began to wander around the upper realm. After Lil Man ascended to the upper level, he was found by Old Master Xiao and brought to Borealis City. During these few years, Xiao Man had always been waiting for her young master, so she had never taken half a step out of Northlight City. Along the way, Xiaoyang began to explain to Xiao Man where these places were, what kind of sects there were, and what kind of scenery there were. If there were any good sceneries, the master and servant would also stop and admire them. After arriving at some specific places, Xiaoyang would sprinkle some seeds or germinate the spiritual flowers and herbs that were still alive. All of this was to allow the flowing cloud world to become even more abundant in spirit qi under the influence of these heavenly treasures. With the two people from the Sun family handling Northlight City, Xiaoyang didn't have to worry, so he was very relaxed when doing these things. Now, Xiaoyang could be said to be known throughout the world. After seeing him, many cultivators worshipped him very much. Xiaoyang didn't put on airs and greeted them warmly. Of course, that was all. He didn't even bother with small talk. After all, he needed to set up all these things in these 3 days. Time was still a little tight. If he talked to everyone for a while every time he met, he didn't know when he would be able to complete this huge project. After seeing the things and heavenly treasures left behind by Lord Xiao, many people didn't touch them at all. Some sects even sent elders to guard them to prevent ignorant cultivators from plucking them and ruining Lord Zhao's plan. During this time, Xiaoyang also took Lil Man to the Taiying sect and the Taiyang sect. In the end, they went to the Dark Night Sacred Land, which made Lil Man feel even more surprised. Although Lil Man had heard about these places long ago, seeing it with his own eyes was truly shocking. At the same time, Xiaoyang told Lil Man about some of the things that happened when he went out to train, which opened Lil Man's eyes. Young master, you've thrown most of these good things in these cold places. Aren't you afraid of being eaten by wild beasts? Lil Man asked curiously. Xiaoyang waved his hand with a smile. No matter what living being it is, they all have their own opportunities. Of course, if those animals are lucky enough to eat them, it's their fortune. It's not a problem. Xiao Man, on the other hand, blinked her large eyes. Her eyes were filled with confusion. It's not that easy to completely change the direction of the flowing cloud world's spirit, qi, and fortune. My arrangements, this time, can only be considered the beginning. I'm just forcefully raising the surface, Xiaoyang sighed helplessly. The flowing cloud world had been barren for a long time. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that it had no vitality. What Xiaoyang was doing now was using the strength of the surface to forcefully repair the vitality of the flowing cloud world. Although the effect wasn't very obvious, it was still there. This was a long-term plan, so it couldn't be rushed. After finishing all the arrangements outside, Xiaoyang brought Lil Man back to Northlight City. As for himself, he went to the Earth's core under the guidance of the World Core. If you bury the pseudo-spirit vein here, although it won't be as effective as Northlight City, it'll be enough for me to recover a lot and increase the vitality of the entire flowing cloud world. Of course, I'll use the pseudo-spirit vein more for myself. I won't give much back to the world. When Xiaoyang heard the World Core's words, he smiled and nodded. From his point of view, even if it absorbed all of the pseudo-spirit vein, it wouldn't be a problem. This was because the world core was the flowing cloud world. If he was strong enough, the flowing cloud world would be strengthened accordingly. If you're fast enough, the pseudo-spirit vein might be even more effective. The world core transmitted this message. When Xiaoyang heard this, he nodded solemnly. This was because the world core had already told Xiaoyang everything that had happened. If it was used well enough, the world core could use the pseudo-spirit vein as a foundation to create a real spirit vein that belonged to the flowing cloud world. It could be said that this was an incomparably vast and crazy project. It even made people feel that it was a little whimsical. However, Xiaoyang felt that it was still worth a try. If this was successful, the flowing cloud world would be strengthened qualitatively. After a few years, it would be comparable to the God realm. Chapter 2065. After receiving this news, Xiaoyang's thoughts became even more serious. This was because he realized that after forming a contract with the flowing cloud realm, it would no longer be that easy for him to break through to the martial emperor realm. Not only would he be able to form an alliance with the God realm, but he would also be able to change the entire structure of the flowing cloud realm. Therefore, he began to think carefully about how to make this matter perfect and maximize the benefits of this matter. However, in the next moment, the world core poured cold water on Xiaoyang, telling him that he still had a long way to go and that there was no need to rush. Then, Xiaoyang was sent back to Northern Light City by the world core. As the world core revealed more and more information to Xiaoyang, his heart calmed down and he became a lot more steady. He didn't even consider going out to train anymore. Instead, he prepared to wholeheartedly develop the flowing cloud realm. Of course, with Xiaoyang's current cultivation level, the only place in the 3,000 small worlds that he could train in was the God world. However, the God realm was only a place suitable for cultivation. It wasn't a place for training. On the 4th day after Xiaoyang's return, the celebratory banquet was held as scheduled. Many powerful figures from all over the flowing cloud realm were invited. They all came to attend the banquet. Ever since this news spread, in addition to Xiaoyang's inspection of the flowing cloud realm, everyone felt as if they had eaten a pill of reassurance. They no longer had to worry. At the celebratory banquet, Sun Dishing and Sun Yukai began to give very exciting speeches. Their speeches made everyone's blood boil. It was as if a beautiful tomorrow was right in front of them. In the past, although the flowing cloud realm had always been fighting against the demon realm, the overall situation had never changed. It was like a pool of stagnant water. However, now, it was as if it had come back to life. This also made countless people see hope. The realm that they didn't dare to dream of in the past wasn't too big of a problem now. It was easily obtainable. As a result, everyone's ambition grew even higher. Perhaps what they wanted could become even more. Why was this possible? Naturally, it was because there was a leader who could turn the tide. Thank you all for coming today. As long as I, Xiaoyang, am still in the flowing cloud world, I will not treat you all unfairly. I will lead you all even further, Xiaoyang said loudly. As soon as this was said, countless people began to cheer. They knew that this wasn't just for show. Xiaoyang had been doing this all along. It could be said that clan leader Zhao's name was well known in the upper realm. Moreover, everyone respected and admired him from the bottom of their hearts. If he could do what Xiao Gongzhu did, then he would have no regrets in this life. After the celebration banquet, I will preach for 7 days in Baixing City. Fellow Taoists can come and listen to my preaching. Xiaoyang continued. As soon as he said that, many people began to cheer again. Some of the younger cultivators were especially excited. After all, during clan leader Zhao's preaching last time, there were people who were inspired and broke through their shackles. As such, in everyone's eyes, this was an opportunity. It just depended on whether they were lucky enough to receive it. King Da and King Qin smiled. Such a hubbub of voices was truly moving. At the same time, they also realized that Xiaoyang must have put in a lot of effort and contribution to be able to achieve what he did today. At least in their eyes, the entire flowing cloud world was like this. It wasn't simply because of strength. In order to be fanatical, it needed the hearts of the people. After some things were explained, everyone began to eat and drink. Xiao Yang, on the other hand, returned to his seat and sat together with the guests from the divine realm. As for Mu Yang, Chu Taiyin, and the others, they also accompanied him. Senior King Qin, thank you for coming in time. Xiao Yang cheers to you. Xiao Yang raised his wine glass and said with a smile. King Qin's expression froze for a moment. Then he smiled and drank a glass. For a moment, everyone started toasting. I think it's meaningless for everyone to drink based on their cultivation base. How about we all get drunk today? Unrivaled God stood up and raised his wine glass. Baldy immediately agreed and said, if we don't get drunk after drinking, what's the point of drinking? Immediately, everyone laughed and agreed to this suggestion. At the same time, they also said that if anyone dared to secretly drink, they would punish him by crawling under the table like a dog. Everyone present was a reputable figure. How could they be so shameless as to do such a thing? Chu Taiyin, on the other hand, ran away because the flowing cloud world needed someone to guard it. Everyone didn't hold it against her. With the help of the alcohol, the communication between everyone quickly became lively. Even Mu Yang began to call King Qin, who was famous in the God realm and one of the top powerhouses in the 3,000 minor worlds, brother. King Qin was not annoyed by this. In fact, he was very happy. Drinking was like this. There was no need to be reserved about one's status. If that was the case, it would be meaningless. These fine wines came from the God realm. Even if one had a cultivation base, it would be difficult for a powerhouse like King Wu to drink. Now, they did not have to do anything deliberately. Hence, they got drunk even faster. Moreover, there were many people toasting them. How could they withstand it? Dewang was fine. He just sat at the side and said nothing when he was drunk. King Qin, on the other hand, did not put on any airs. He was like a commoner having a great time. Xiao Yang, I've let you down this time. All of a sudden, the Duke of Qin's mood became downcast, and he couldn't even speak clearly. Xiao Yang heard this and did not care at all. He waved his hand and said, How have you let me down? Almost everyone at Xiao Yang's table was drunk. Only Dewang was slightly better. However, he used the excuse of not being able to hold his liquor and went back to rest. Therefore, no one could hear their conversation clearly. If I had done more when I was conquering the Greenly realm and pursued that old monster, he would not have escaped to the drifting cloud realm and almost brought you a calamity, the Qin Emperor stammered. It could be said that the Duke of Qin had always been brooding over this matter. He felt that this was a war started by the God realm, but in the end, Xiao Yang had to bear the brunt of it. Therefore, he felt very guilty. What nonsense are you talking about? Look at me. Aren't I perfectly fine right now? Xiao Yang's tongue was already swollen as he spoke unclearly. Chapter 2066. This celebration banquet lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. Those who came could be said to have drunk themselves into oblivion. However, those with heavy responsibilities knew when to stop. Even if they were drunk, they would sober up as soon as they left the banquet. For example, Sun Dishing and Sun Yukai were no longer in charge of just Borealis City. They had Baixing City as well. They even needed to carefully plan the development of the entire drifting cloud world. Although Xiaoyang was the ruler of the drifting cloud world, many details were left to the two of them. Sun Dishing and Sun Yukai were better at internal affairs and development, which were what they were good at. Therefore, they were very good at handling things. The people who came to this place all came in high spirits and returned happily. Xiao Yang only showed up on the night of the banquet and drank with everyone. After he got drunk, Xiao Man brought him back to his room. Even though Xiao Yang was drunk due to his special physique, he was able to wake up early the next morning. With a thought, he became much more clear-headed. Although the banquet was still going on, he had no intention of continuing to participate. As a cultivator, once they indulged in wine and meat, it was very easy for their willpower to be worn down. Everyone knew this. but some people just couldn't control themselves and wanted to drink more. Of course, there were also some people who wanted to use this opportunity to broaden their social circle. After all the core members of the drifting cloud world were gathered here. It was rare for them to see each other, so how could they miss out on such a great opportunity? It seemed that everything had returned to normal with Xiao Yang's return. Due to some changes, the drifting cloud world also showed signs of recovery. Even the spirit qi began to thicken, but it was very difficult to detect. It was like the environment was slowly changing. You would feel that everything was natural, so it was difficult to detect the changes. 3 days passed quietly. At the same time, many changes occurred. While Mu Yang and Qin Wang were drunk, Mu Yang exchanged some insights and went into seclusion. Under Xiao Yang's orders, Sun Yukai was also trying to break through to a higher realm. The mentality of countless people also began to undergo a huge change. Since the king had nothing to do, he wandered around the flowing cloud world. He was prepared to investigate this place and see what was so special about it that it could give birth to so many miracles. Xiao Yang also began his own preaching. Every day, he would preach to a sea of people. Although there were many people, it was very quiet. They were afraid that if there was any noise, they would not be able to hear what this almighty being was saying. Everything was in motion, and the recovery of the flowing cloud realm became even faster. Sometimes Xiao Yang would chat with Emperor Qin and unrivaled God about some things. However, most of the time, it was about the middle world. Every time King Qin thought about how Xiao Yang had personally created a portion of fortune, only to have it eventually fall upon the God realm, this made him feel somewhat uncomfortable. However, this was the nature of fortune, and there was nothing he could do about it. There were many things that could not be explained in a few words. Moreover, the fortune of the 3,000 minor worlds was not something that he, Emperor Qin, could control. Therefore, Emperor Qin could only feel indignant about this matter. Xiao Yang, I think this girl by your side is really not bad, Emperor Qin said with a chuckle. Hearing this, Xiao Yang frowned slightly. However, when he turned to look, he realized that Emperor Qin's eyes were very clear, and there was even some admiration in them. Xiao Yang smiled and said she's not bad indeed. It's just a pity that she's not motivated enough. Xiao Yang had always known about this. Xiao Naughty relied on him too much. Moreover, he had also tried to beat around the bush to talk about these things. However, this girl did not take it to heart at all. What could he do? Emperor Qin looked at this young man strangely, then shook his head helplessly. Even an outsider like him could see the knack behind this. However, as the person involved, he still seemed to be clueless. If you can bear the pain and part with her, I'll take her in as a disciple. Don't worry, I won't force her to join the God realm, Emperor Qin said after a long while, and his tone became much more serious. In Emperor Qin's opinion, although Xiao Naughty's talent was not top-notch, her temperament was extremely frightening. Moreover, she was a person who could persevere. If she could use that momentum in her cultivation, it would be enough for her to become a giant in 100 years. She could even dream of reaching a higher realm. This could be considered as Emperor Qin's compensation to Xiao Yang. What he wanted to impart to Xiao Naughty was naturally some of his special skills. Thank you for your kindness, Emperor Qin. But I can't make the decision on this matter, Xiao Yang said with a smile. Emperor Qin was stunned for a moment, and his eyes were filled with confusion. If this was just an excuse, then it was a little inferior. It's up to Xiao Naughty to decide for herself, Xiao Yang said. When Qin Wang heard this, he laughed bitterly. Then his gaze landed on the girl. Xiao Naughty put down the teapot in her hand and curtsied, saying, "Thank you, senior. I just want to stay by young master's side." Xiao Naughty's thoughts were very simple. She had cultivated like crazy in the middle level so that she could return to Xiao Yang's side. Therefore, she had done it. As for the God realm, the leader of the 3,000 small worlds, she had no interest in it at all. At least to her, no matter how big the world was, it was not as important as her young master. The Duke of Qin, slapped himself on the forehead with a gloomy expression. "Xiao Naughty, my fourth uncle's status in the god realm is second only to the emperor god. Not to mention his high status and power, a martial emperor is one of the few in the 3,000 small worlds. In the god realm, who knows how many geniuses would kill to be his disciple?" Unrivaled God said as he swallowed. Xiao Naughty only smiled faintly and said, "I know." This simple reply was a huge blow to Emperor Qin's heart. This was the first time he had asked to take in a disciple, and he did not expect to be rejected just like that. Suddenly, Qin Wang glared fiercely at Xiao Yang with a questioning look on his face. Xiao Yang smiled calmly because he had not seen Xiao Naughty as a maidservant for a long time. Instead, he saw her as his own sister. Since she was unwilling, he would not force her. Chapter 2067. The Qin Emperor waved his sleeves and turned his head to the side like an angry child. He was unwilling to look at them. It could be said that this failure was the biggest failure of his life for the Qin Emperor. He had always thought that he was at the top of the world in terms of both status and ability. If he wanted to take in a disciple, it would be a gift to that person. However, reality was too cruel. The first time he took in a disciple in his life, he hit a wall. Unrivaled God smiled wryly as well. He could not believe that this girl had turned down such a great opportunity. He had to admit that there were many strange people and strange things in the drifting cloud realm. It was hard to figure out what they were thinking. Xiao Man did not care if she had offended the distinguished guest. Instead, she waited on the side. Xiao Yang looked at the famous third king. The smile on his lips became more playful. This Qin Emperor was quite interesting. Although he was a little angry after being rejected, he was not angry at all. After chatting with Unrivaled God for a while, Xiao Yang went to Baixing City. In these 7 days, he would spend 4 hours a day preaching. After Xiao Yang left, the Qin Emperor suddenly turned around and stared at Xiao Man. Xiao Man could not help but feel a little scared when an almighty martial emperor stared at her like that. Could it be that this almighty was angry and wanted to do something inappropriate? Now that the young master had just left, it would be difficult for him to make it back in time. "I still have something to do. I'll take my leave first," Xiao Man said in a panic and quickly ran back to her room. Unrivaled God could only shake his head helplessly when he saw this. His fourth uncle's temperament was really unpredictable. Qin Wang, on the other hand, laughed heartily, looking extremely delighted. "Fourth uncle, it's not appropriate for you to tease a little girl like that. After all, you're one of the famous third kings in the god realm. Wouldn't it be beneath your dignity to do something like that?" Unrivaled God said helplessly. The Qin Emperor snorted coldly. His eyes turned sharp as he stared straight at his nephew. "Fourth uncle, I didn't see anything." Unrivaled God quickly waved his hands and said. Unrivaled God could not help but feel helpless when it came to his unpredictable fourth uncle. He had no idea what fourth uncle was thinking at all. After all, the state of mind of a martial emperor was difficult to fathom. He could only submit to such tyrannical power and did not even dare to breathe loudly. Unrivaled God used to think that his fourth uncle was quite fun to play with. Now it seemed like he was still too young and knew too little. On the other side, Danwu was also almost done investigating the surrounding situation. When he returned to the small courtyard, he saw the uncle and nephew duo's somewhat comical expressions. "Wu Shuang, did I miss a good show just now?" the king asked with a smile. Shen Wuxuang pursed his lips and looked at fourth uncle, saying, "Father, please discipline your younger brother. He's already a few thousand years old. Yet he's still behaving so frivolously. Impudent! How dare you speak like that?" the king said angrily. On the other side, Xiao Yang continued his preaching. His gains today were not too bad. 2 of King Wu's rank for disciples had successfully broken through while he was preaching. For a moment, it could be said that he was the envy of others. Countless people were envious of this luck and opportunity. After the preaching, Xiao Yang was not in a hurry to return. Instead, he began to make arrangements again. The first wave of arrangements a few days ago was almost done. Moreover, there were some losses in the process, so he needed to make some additions. This time, the additions were not made according to the heart of the world's instructions. Instead, he made the arrangements based on some conjectures in his mind. After all, the heart of the world's ideas were fixed most of the time. It was difficult to detect the direction of luck and spiritual energy at the first moment. It was too rigid. As long as the foundation did not change, there was no harm in making some changes. After everything was done, it was already late at night. Xiao Yang sat on a high mountain, overlooking the world that belonged to him. Lu Yin, tell me, how long do you think this time will last? Xiao Yang asked. However, the heart of the world did not answer him. In its eyes, this was a meaningless question. Although everything is developing now, when we really reach the middle world, who knows what kind of enemies we'll face, Xiao Yang said. Once a small world was promoted to a middle world, it was indeed an exciting matter for them. They would be able to obtain even more luck. However, they would also face an extremely cruel reality. That was to say, many people would try to conquer worlds that were not strong enough for the sake of fighting for luck. Although they would be invincible in small worlds after allying with the God realm. However, once they reached the middle world, they would be nothing in the broader stage. If you have nothing to do, why don't you open all the places that I sealed back then? The heart of the world said. Hearing this, Xiao Yang was slightly stunned. Soon after, he came back to his senses. Indeed, ever since he came to the upper world, he had never heard of the flowing cloud world having blessed lands. At first, Xiao Yang thought that the flowing cloud world was too barren, so there were none. However, now it seemed that this was not the case. Immediately after, Xiao Yang began to communicate with the heart of the world. During the conversation, Xiao Yang obtained a lot of information. Because the flowing cloud world's vitality had been greatly damaged, and the native cultivator strength was extremely weak, it was difficult for them to protect the blessed lands. As such, the heart of the world made a prompt decision and immediately sealed all of the blessed lands. However, Xiao Yang had no idea why such a situation had occurred. The heart of the world did not reveal anything. Instead, when it talked about this matter, it was extremely sad and sorrowful. Evidently, it had experienced many things, which was why it had such feelings. In the end, Xiao Yang could only sigh. In the end, that was all in the past. What was the point of bringing up the past and opening up old scars? What the flowing cloud world was like in the past was no longer important. What was important was what this world would become under Xiao Yang's leadership in the future. Soon after, Xiao Yang calmed down and began to sense. Soon, he discovered a few places that had never appeared in anyone's consciousness. Presumably, these were the blessed lands that the heart of the world had sealed up. The seals on these blessed lands were extremely sturdy, and even with his identity as the Lord, he was unable to open them. Chapter 2068. Xiao Yang had not found any clues about the secret of the blessed paradises being sealed in the ancient books. However, the glory of the flowing cloud world was gradually being revealed to him. If it wasn't for the fact that the flowing cloud world was powerful enough in the past, how could it have these things? The reason why he was forced to seal himself was probably because he had no choice but to protect himself. Now, Xiao Yang's thoughts on this matter had become increasingly heavy. The changes in the situation had suddenly caught him off guard. He had always felt that the flowing cloud world was a barren land and that it was difficult to develop because of its lack of fate and spiritual energy. However, who would have thought that it was because of this matter that it began to decline? There were many possibilities, but Xiao Yang did not make wild guesses. After all, the truth of the past was not that important. As long as he had the ability to protect the blessed paradises, he could open them up. Soon after, Xiao Yang began to think. How to open the blessed paradises became a problem that he had to carefully consider. As for how to open them up after they were opened, he had to think about it carefully. In the end, Xiao Yang threw this problem to Sun Dishing. When Sun Dishing found out about this, he was stunned for a moment. However, he did not feel that this was a bad thing. Moreover, he had not announced it to the outside world yet, so he only needed to think about how to deal with it. Furthermore, he didn't even know what the blessed enclave looked like. Things that he didn't understand at all were even more difficult to be certain of. As such, it was best to make preparations first. In fact, in just 3 days, Sun Dishing had already submitted many plans. As for how to make the final decision, he would have to wait until the blessed paradises were opened. Because Xiao Yang still had to continue teaching, he was not in a hurry to open the blessed paradises. This was not something that could be rushed. Moreover, Xiao Yang felt that his strength was not enough and it was not safe enough. In the following days, as he continued to teach, there were people who had broken through. At the same time, there were some people who benefited greatly and went into closed-door cultivation after returning. In the end, a total of 13 people broke through on the spot. Among them, 2 disciples with the most outstanding talent were selected, and they were valued by the upper echelons of North Light City. Moreover, they began to focus on nurturing them. Xiao Yang only informed him about these matters. He naturally saw that these disciples were extraordinary, but he didn't have extra time to lead them. Therefore, he didn't come forward to avoid harming others. Secondly, he didn't have any intention of taking in a disciple. After the 7 days of teaching ended, Xiao Yang began to focus on the matter of opening the grotto heaven. At the same time, Xiao Yang would also walk around the upper realm to survey the terrain and the flow of providence. Of course, he had also gone to a place that had been sealed. No matter how he tried to sense it, as long as he didn't borrow the power of the realm core, he wouldn't be able to discover it. It could be said that it was extremely hidden. Even Qin Wang and De Wang, the 2 martial emperors from the deity realm, did not notice anything amiss. From this, it could be seen how exquisite the seal was. The previous drifting cloud realm was probably also immeasurable. As for the past events, the realm core wasn't willing to reveal anything. Xiao Yang could only speculate on his own. On this day, Xiao Yang was lying in his courtyard, deep in thought, when an important guest from the deity realm came over. "Fellow Xiao, I'm here to bid farewell." Da Wang cupped his hands and said. Hearing this, Xiao Yang immediately stood up. He laughed awkwardly and said, "I've been busy with the affairs of the drifting cloud realm these days, so I've neglected you. Please forgive me." Other than the initial act of accompanying him, Xiao Yang rarely stayed in this courtyard after he started teaching the cultivation method. As a result, he really didn't fulfill his role as a host. "We're not blaming you. There are many things to be done in the drifting cloud realm. Now, you have to pay more attention," De Wang said. From De Wang's point of view, after this young man raised his own strength to a certain level, he began to wholeheartedly raise the strength of the entire realm. That was the style of a common master, taking the world as his own responsibility. De Wang had been to many realms, and he had seen some so-called common masters. However, most of them were just using their own strength to squeeze the entire world to strengthen themselves. As for someone like Xiao Yang, who had no selfish desires, it was truly rare to see someone like him. However, it was also because of this that De Wang admired this young man even more. How many people in the world could do things to this extent? "I'm looking forward to our battle." Qin Wang patted Xiao Yang's shoulder and said. It could be said that Qin Wang had been looking forward to that day ever since Wei Bei Xan was defeated. However, who would have thought that the world would make fools of people? In the future, whether or not they would be able to fight to their heart's content was unknown. Xin Wushuang's eyes were also filled with helplessness. However, he also knew that he had been in the drifting cloud realm for a long time. He had already done what he needed to do. It was meaningless to continue staying. All good things must come to an end. After today's parting, I don't know when we'll meet again. However, I hope that we can meet Master Xiao as soon as possible. De Wang sighed. De Wang could not say the rest of his words. Right now, The style of the divine realm was quite similar to burning the bridge after crossing the river. This made the king more or less unhappy in his heart. Danwu had originally thought that Xiaoyang would be able to break through to the level of a martial emperor after they ascended to the middle world. When that time came, they could also ascend to the middle world, and it was possible for them to meet again. However, in these days, everything this young man had done reflected his obsession with his own world. Therefore, he was definitely not someone who would abandon his own world and ascend alone. However, it was not easy for him to ascend with the drifting cloud realm. Even the powerful god realm had to spend 1,000 years to plan, and they had to ally with other worlds to have any hope. Even though the drifting cloud realm was constantly changing, it was not something that could be done in a day to catch up with the god realm. The sky is high and the water is long. We'll meet again someday. Danwu gave a fist salute and rose from the ground. We'll meet again someday. Qin Wang and Shen Wushuang said one after another and left with the king. Don't worry, everyone. I think we'll meet again soon. Xiaoyang suddenly thought of something and said, I'll be waiting for that day. I'll treat you to a meal, and we'll go home together. Chapter 2069. In the realm of the gods, when the emperor god heard that Qin Wang had sent back the news of the drifting cloud realm, he was completely shocked. Xiaoyang had actually killed Han Jingming. That was a martial royal expert. How did he do it? Although he had used a lot of tricks, he had succeeded. Now he had even condensed 6 spiritual meridians. It was shocking. King just stood at the side and did not say a word. He had only reported what he had seen and heard. On the other hand, Qin Wang was very concerned about the details of the battle. Moreover, he had found some clues and deduced the real situation of the battle. Big brother, Xiaoyang is really brave. He is really admirable. Qin Wang's eyes were filled with yearning as he exclaimed. In the eyes of Qin Wang, Shen Qifeng, among the younger generation in the 3,000 small worlds, only Xiaoyang was the opponent he looked forward to the most. However, fate made fools of people. He had personally killed a martial royal expert, but in the end the martial royal fate was taken by the realm of the gods. As such, it was impossible for Xiaoyang to enter the martial royal realm again. Because of this, the god emperor's eyes became much dimmer. He also felt a little uncomfortable, especially after hearing the details of Xiaoyang's battle from Qin Wang. He felt even more helpless. Even Princess Mingzhu, who had always been arrogant, could not help but be moved when she heard these words. Even someone as strong as her would not dare to say that she could fight against a martial royal expert after condensing 5 spiritual meridians back then. In the 3,000 small worlds, the number of people who could break through to the martial royal realm was very limited. There were so many geniuses in the world. Those who could step into the martial royal realm were not as simple as luck. Similarly, they needed to be extremely strong to be able to do it. Therefore, among the martial royal experts in the 3,000 small worlds, which one of them was not a tyrannical existence? So what if the realm of the gods was the first world? In order to kill Han Jingming, they had sent out 2 martial royal experts. However, the final result was that he was seriously injured and had to flee far away. From this, it could be seen how terrifying Xiaoyang's strength was, not to mention how much power he had borrowed in this battle. The fact that he had done it was already extraordinary. The god emperor muttered to himself. Right now, he was feeling extremely conflicted and helpless. What he should do had become a knot in his heart. Everyone's mentality had also changed a little. However, everyone had to admit that Xiaoyang had indeed become a very dazzling star. He had done things that no one else could do. Emperor God, since Xiaoyang has already condensed his 6th spiritual pulse, I'm afraid it will be difficult for him to return to the martial emperor realm, King Zhao said after a long while. Although this was a splash of cold water, it made many people feel very unhappy after hearing this. However, which one of the people present didn't know? Even the divine realm's Princess Mingzhu, who was extremely talented, could only use 5 spiritual veins to break through to the martial emperor realm. As the number of spiritual veins in one's body increased, it would become more and more difficult to break through. Therefore, even though Xiaoyang was also extremely talented, he had already surpassed the limit of what he could achieve. At least in the divine realm, there had not been anyone who could break through with 6 spiritual veins in the past 10,000 years. In the divine realm in the past, although there were not many experts with 5 or 6 spiritual veins, there were still quite a number of them. However, when a martial royal expert passed away, those with more spiritual veins were unable to break through. Instead, it was the easiest for those with 3 spiritual veins. It all depended on one's limit. If there were too many spiritual veins, it would be a disaster. Moreover, the fate of the 3,000 small worlds had been completely divided. No matter how one looked at it, it would not be easy for Xiaoyang to break through to the martial emperor realm. In fact, it was completely impossible. There were many problems that they had a tacit understanding of, but they would not say it out loud. After all, some words would have a different meaning once spoken out loud. Jiang Zhangqing, who was standing at the side, also looked very troubled. He was also in a dilemma as to what he should do. Although Xiaoyang was just an outsider who had received a favor from the divine realm, he had also given a lot of things back to the divine realm. From the disturbance in the tomb of the god of sin to the killing of Han Jingming, which one of them was not a great merit in the peaceful divine realm. Emperor God, now that the divine realm, Sword Heart realm, and Sun Snow realm have reached their peak, and now that Princess Mingzhu's realm has stabilized, the 9 martial royal experts can gather to discuss the matter of ascending to the middle world. Jiang Zhangqing said slowly after hesitating for a long time. As the prime minister of the divine realm, Jiang Zhangqing naturally had a good grasp of the direction of the divine realm. Now that the time was ripe, it was naturally time to discuss the matter of ascension. Moreover, this could not be delayed. It had to be done in the shortest time possible. It was best to make the final decision. Now that the 9 spiritual veins had been completely occupied, it was impossible for Xiaoyang to break through to the martial emperor realm. After we have ascended, the spiritual veins of the 9 martial royal experts will be empty. This way, Xiaoyang will be able to increase his strength quickly. Who knows, he might be able to become the alliance leader, and we can meet again in the 3,000 middle worlds, Jiang Zhangqing said. Regarding these questions, Jiang Zhangqing had to stand up and say them. There were some things that the emperor god could not say directly because of his feelings and face. However, Jiang Zhangqing was different. He was the emperor god's other mouth. Therefore, there were some things that he had to say. It could be said that Jiang Zhangqing had always been in a high position, and even the 3 kings had to be courteous to him, all because of his conduct. He was indeed excellent. Although he seemed unreasonable at times, he was extremely calm and could ensure the best interests of the divine realm. Hearing this, the emperor god looked troubled. King Qin was also very upset. He naturally understood the reasoning behind this, but he was still sullen and unwilling to accept it. The current style of the divine realm was also like burning the bridge after crossing the river. This was also something that the king of Qin had always disliked. However, the general trend was irresistible. Who could change anything? They could not possibly change the 1,000-year-old plan of the divine realm because of one person. Moreover, there was also the help of the other 2 worlds. The general trend was irresistible. This was also something that no one could change. Since you've already taken this step, you have to continue. You can't possibly go back, right? If they really retreated, many of the plans would collapse and cease to exist. Chapter 2070. You're right, Prime Minister. I hope the God Emperor will allow it. King Zhao was the first to agree. Although they all glanced at King Zhao coldly, they all knew that his eldest son, Shenluo, had been defeated by Xiaoyang during the God Realm tournament. It was normal for him to hold a grudge against Shenluo. However, King Zhao's face was full of righteousness. He did not have the slightest bit of joy or vile thoughts. Personal appreciation was ultimately up to the individual. However, the general trend of the world was right in front of them. It was like an arrow released from a bow. How could they turn back now? It would be a pity if they were to break halfway. In the blink of an eye, the crowd no longer despised King Zhao. They all knew very well that this was just the general trend. It could not be changed in the end. Everything was a foregone conclusion. No one could change it with their own power. No matter how powerful one was, it was impossible. Sometimes the reality was just so frustrating. What you wanted might not be able to be achieved. After all, the key to this matter was to carry out the plan that they had previously planned. It was impossible to forcefully change it just because of some unexpected surprises. I second the motion. As soon as he said this, everyone immediately looked over. It was Shen Wushuang who spoke. Everyone knew that Shen Wushuang was Xiao Yang's best friend in the God realm. The relationship between them was even more unshakable. Back then, Shen Wushuang had even given up his right to participate in the God realm tournament for Xiaoyang. If he had not gone into closed-door cultivation and successfully broken through to rank 9, he might have missed the great opportunity to enter the tomb of the God of Sin. Although Shen Wushuang had done so because he was betting that he would be able to break through successfully without relying on the opportunity in the tomb of the God of Sin. However, what if he had lost the bet? In that case, he would most likely suffer a crushing defeat. Therefore, this was what everyone knew and heard. Their feelings for each other could not be faked. If even unrivaled God could behave this way, how could they continue to put on an act? Sometimes, one's thoughts could be described as complicated. It would not be an exaggeration to say that they were dirty. I second the motion. Please make a decision, God Emperor. Don't ruin things with good intentions. Immediately, the core figures present started to speak as well. They started to change their attitudes and ask the God Emperor to make a decision. Since that's the case, I have no choice but to do so, the God Emperor said with a helpless expression on his face. Helplessness was true, but it was also true that the God Emperor wanted to push the God realm into the middle world. It could be said that when the God Emperor knew that he was going to succeed the throne, he had already begun to plan for this matter. How could thousands of years of hard work be wasted because of one person? Even though the lifespan of a martial emperor was not endless, it was still unfair to most people. Moreover, the younger generation might not be able to wait until then. The God Emperor is wise. The ministers cheered loudly. Prime Minister Jiang, immediately head to the Sword Heart realm and invite them over to discuss this matter. The Divine Emperor ordered. Jiang Zhongqing cupped his fists and said, "This subject accepts the order." "The king, I'll have to trouble you to make a trip to the Sun Snow realm to invite the old ancestor over," said the God Emperor. "Yes, your majesty," the king said. Immediately, the God Emperor began to issue orders for all the disciples in the outside world to immediately return to the God realm. As for those who wanted to go out to train, they were not allowed to leave the God realm. If they were unwilling to go to the middle world, there was no need to force them. They could leave on their own. After a series of government orders were issued, the crowd immediately accepted the orders and left to do their own things. Soon, only the God Emperor and Princess Mingzhu were left in the palace hall. The father and daughter sat there in silence. The God Emperor began to plan in his heart. How should the God realm be promoted to a middle world? After reaching the middle world, he had to carefully consider what kind of hardships he would face. Princess Mingzhu was not so concerned about this. That was because she was thinking about how extraordinary that young man, the friend that her cousin was talking about, was. On the other side, after several government orders were issued, countless people began to realize that the God realm was no longer the same. However, at the same time, countless cultivators began to feel their blood boiling with excitement. Many cultivators had been perplexed at King Wu's peak for a long time. They lacked that portion of luck, yet they could not break through. This had become a sore point in their hearts. However, if that was the case, then the situation would be very different. Once they reached the middle world, there was a great possibility that they would set foot into that level. That was the level of their dreams. With that, who would not be excited? Unrivaled God, on the other hand, sat in the courtyard of his house and drank. Yang Sun, on the other hand, sat beside him and sighed as well. The reason why Unrivaled God was the first to step forward and agree with him was that he was very clear-headed and understood the situation very well. Therefore, he had no choice but to step forward. However, when he thought about how this was his farewell to his good friend, and how it might be an eternal farewell, he felt upset. Moreover, the god realm prohibited him from going out, so he could not visit him. Of course, it was good that he did not go. Otherwise, the guilt in his heart would grow, and in the end he would not be able to control himself. If that was the case, then it would be meaningless. Yang Sun was not in a good mood either. He felt that it was a pity that Xiaoyang had brushed shoulders with the god realm. Similarly, their third sister was also nowhere to be found. This made him feel even worse. Once they ascended to the middle world, it would be difficult for them to see Ziying again. After sending off the distinguished guests from the god realm, Xiaoyang had placed all his attention on the drifting cloud realm. He still had a long way to go before he could break through to the martial emperor level. Therefore, he did not care about these things. He had time as well. There was no need to rush. Therefore, everything was as usual. He just did not go out to train again. During this time, he even opened up a grotto heaven. It was called the Distant Southern Grotto Heaven, and it produced many treasures of heaven and earth. Among them were some ferocious beasts, but he did not kill them. The Distant Southern Grotto Heaven was extraordinarily large. It was dozens of times larger than Northlight City. It could be said that with the appearance of the Distant Southern Grotto Heaven, the area of the drifting cloud realm had increased significantly. The spiritual energy in the Grotto Heaven was abundant. There were also countless opportunities in it, enough for countless people to benefit from. Of course, it would also become the burial ground of many cultivators. Opportunities and dangers always went hand in hand. After successfully opening up the Grotto Heaven, Xiaoyang spread the news. With his current ability, there was not much he needed in the Grotto Heaven. Therefore, it was better not to go. Chapter 2071. Because the Southern Mystery Land had just been developed, there might be some dangers inside. Chu Taiyin was the first to enter. He didn't take anything away. He just wanted to check out how dangerous it was. Chu Taiyin didn't disappoint. He came to the conclusion that anyone above the third level of King Wu could enter to check it out. There weren't too many dangers inside, but if they tried too hard, they would lose their lives. Cultivation was just so heartless. Under Xiaoyang's orders, Chu Taiyin only went to check it out. He didn't remove the dangers inside. Otherwise, if there were no dangers in the Grotto Heaven, it would make more cultivators feel that it was natural. In the future, they would be like flowers in a greenhouse. Once they went out to train, they would probably face a situation that would be beyond redemption. The path of cultivation wasn't smooth sailing, but it was okay to be taught. At once, countless cultivators rushed into the Southern Mystery Land to search for their own opportunities. The powerhouses all understood Xiaoyang's intentions. Therefore, they didn't go to the Mystery Land. Instead, they wandered between teaching their disciples and cultivating themselves. This was the only way to increase the overall capability of the drifting cloud field. If everything was placed on Xiaoyang's shoulders, then he would be in a situation where he could not do anything at all. Plus, there were many people who wanted to go to a higher level world to check it out. They wanted to go to a higher cultivation level. The fate of the 3,000 small worlds wasn't enough to satisfy their ambitions. After all, there weren't many powerhouses in the royal realm. Among so many powerhouses, how could they stand out? If they go to the middle world, the amount of fate they have will be a lot. Therefore, if they went to a bigger stage, their chances would be greater as well. The benefits of this were hard to describe in a few words. Since they had such a great opportunity, if they didn't grab it, it would be a waste. If he missed this great opportunity, he was afraid that he would not have another chance in the future. Even if Xiaoyang wanted to forcefully push the flowing cloud world into the middle world, At that time, they would not be strong enough and would have to spend every day in worry. And that kind of life was not something they wanted to continue. In short, along with the appearance of the distant southern paradise, many people realized that the drift cloud dimension wasn't so simple. As for them, they could also give it a try. If they could become stronger, who would refuse such a thing? After Xiaoyang unsealed the distant southern paradise, he felt that the spirit qi of the flowing cloud realm seemed to have changed slightly because of the appearance of the paradise. Furthermore, he could clearly sense that there were countless benefits within the hollow. Even though they didn't enter, the seal on the distant southern paradise had been lifted, and it had once again become part of the flowing cloud realm. As such, as the master of the flowing cloud realm, Xiaoyang was naturally able to sense it. At the same time, because of the appearance of this paradise, Xiaoyang also felt that his strength had become more abundant. Therefore, he made a prompt decision to go into seclusion. As he went into seclusion, he condensed his seventh spiritual meridian. Everyone was afraid that the more spiritual meridian he condensed, the more difficult it would be to break through to the martial emperor realm. Xiaoyang was very indifferent to this because, in his opinion, this was equivalent to building a foundation for the second time on the path of cultivation. The more spiritual meridian he could condense, the better it would be. As for whether it would obstruct him from breaking through to the martial emperor realm, there was nothing to be said. Although it was a little difficult, with his experience he could still do it. It could be said that the only thing Xiaoyang lacked in the 3,000 small worlds was luck. And this luck was also an extraordinary existence. If he didn't have it, even if he spent his entire life in the 3,000 small worlds, it would be difficult for him to advance even half an inch. However, the heart of the world clearly told him that there was still a way. As for what the way was, the heart of the world did not mention it. It only told him to continue opening the hollow. Every time he opened a hollow, he would benefit from it because it was related to the heart of the world. Xiaoyang's seventh spiritual meridian could be said to be condensed by the power of the distant southern hollow. Of course, half of it was due to Xiaoyang's own strength and comprehension. It did not appear out of thin air. After exhaling a mouthful of turbid air, Xiaoyang sensed a little and saw the grand scene in the distant southern hollow. Many cultivators had found their own opportunities. Even Xiaoman had gained a lot. After consuming some natural treasures, her strength had increased greatly, and there were signs that she was about to break through to the 6th rank of King Wu. Her speed was so fast that it was shocking. Ever since Xiaoyang told her, Xiaoman had been working very hard to cultivate. She was also afraid that one day her young master would continue to ascend and she would not be able to catch up with him. After looking at it for a while, Xiaoyang took out the Pisces token. When he saw the message that the Emperor God had sent him, he merely smiled. Xiaoyang had never been a person who indulged in wild fantasies. He naturally knew that since Han Jingming was dead and the fate did not fall on him, they were already prepared for the realm of the gods. Therefore, it was natural for them to start discussing how to ascend to the middle world. Therefore, they naturally had to put the plan on the agenda. Now, the Emperor God had also invited the Almighties of the Sword Heart world and the Sun Snow world to prepare for the discussion. Although it was a bit like kicking someone to the curb after crossing the river, Xiaoyang was already used to it. It was human nature. Who could say anything about it? Moreover, he had received a favor from the realm of the gods. After the event, the realm of the gods would compensate him well. There was no need to be so conflicted. As for the possibility of him becoming the 10th martial emperor, Xiaoyang did not inform the Emperor God. After all, if he wanted to step into the martial emperor realm, it was something that was uncertain. Who could be sure? If he delayed the other's journey, it would not be good. If he could catch up, then they would work together to ascend to the middle world. If not, then it would not work. The Emperor God had also said that Xiaoyang could now build his own alliance. Once they ascended, they would gather at the peak of King Wu and break through to the martial emperor realm together. They would achieve great things. Chapter 2072. However, Xiaoyang still maintained an indifferent attitude towards this. After all, Some things could not be explained with just a few words. If he wanted to gather all the King Wu's peak cultivators from other worlds, it would not be easy to find all of them. Therefore, it was better to just wait and see. There was no need to overthink. Sometimes, when you think too much, it's not good. At least from how Xiaoyang saw it, he would be able to make it in time. Even though he was not confident, his speed was not slow at all. Then, Xiaoyang started to ask about the location of the second cave that he needed to open. After receiving the heart of the world's guidance, Xiaoyang quickly sensed that the North Peak Heavenly Abode was in the extreme north. Then, Xiaoyang told Sundishing about this and asked him to deal with the issue of entering and exiting the Heavenly Abode. Because of what happened to the South Peak Heavenly Abode before, the people who entered were far too chaotic. The South Peak Heavenly Abode was also damaged. Therefore, this had to be controlled. Or else, in a few years, the South Peak Heavenly Abode would become a barren land. After receiving this news, Sundishing made a decision right away and asked Mu Yang to take care of the South Peak Heavenly Abode. He told him to stop people from entering and to control the situation first. As for how to open the Heavenly Abode in the future, they would have to discuss it together. Even though Sundishing could use Xiaoyang's authority to make decisions on his own, in the end, he lacked consideration. Therefore, if everyone discussed this matter together, there wouldn't be any problems. Plus, as the second most important person in the drifting cloud boundary, Mu Yang was highly respected. Naturally, he was the most suitable person to make decisions. As for after the North Peak Heavenly Abode was opened, there was no need to be in a hurry to reveal it. It would not be too late to open it after everything was planned out. Even though the Apollo sect was in the south and Xiaoyang was going to the extreme north, after thinking about it, it was better for him to do it himself. There was no rush to open the North Peak Heavenly Abode. As for this old friend of his, it was time to pay him a visit. After the time it took for an incense stick to burn, Xiaoyang arrived at the solar school. He did not act as the leader. Instead, he waited in the hall and asked the solar school's disciples to invite Mu Yang out. Xiaoyang, if you want to look for this old man, just come here. Do you need to report? If that's the case, it'll make us seem like strangers. Mu Yang walked in with a smile. Xiaoyang's aura was so powerful that Mu Yang had sensed it a long time ago. As such, he had arrived before the disciples had even gone to report. Elder, this junior doesn't dare to overstep his boundaries. Xiaoyang laughed awkwardly. Mu Yang glared at him and said, You brat, are you trying to beat me up? Are you saying that I'm being rude because I didn't come out to welcome clan leader Xiao? Xiaoyang could only shake his head with a bitter smile when he saw how Mu Yang was pretending to be angry. It was hard to say what kind of person he was. You brat, why have you become so unlikable so quickly? And here I was thinking that you would take time out of your busy schedule to talk to me. I didn't think you'd come to beat me up, Mu Yang sighed. Xiaoyang hurriedly shook his head as well. You're being too serious, elder. When Mu Yang heard this, he glared at him. His face was still filled with displeasure. Xiaoyang was helpless about that. He could only give in and say, I understand, fellow Mu. Mu Yang's expression immediately improved when he heard that. Your aura has become even stronger. Looks like you've gained another spirit vein. Mu Yang stared at Xiaoyang with widened eyes, studying him closely. When Mu Yang saw the young man nod, the corners of his mouth twitched. He even began counting with his fingers. After a few times, his face was filled with shock. You're quite something, brat. You actually have 7 spirit veins now, Mu Yang said in shock. You really are a monster. Mu Yang felt that all of this was unbelievable. He really couldn't understand what this kid was scheming in his heart. Wasn't he taking a bit too much of a risk by doing this? Looking at how calm this fellow was, it was as if he didn't care about this at all. It was as if everything was a matter of course for him. I've come to find you this time because I have some matters to discuss. After some small talk, Xiaoyang revealed his intentions. Speak. Mu Yang wasn't surprised. He naturally understood Xiaoyang. This brat was currently working for the drifting cloud world. How could he have the time to spare? Now that he had come, he probably had something to ask of him. It's about the distant southern grotto heaven. Due to the lack of regulation, too many cultivators have entered. This has damaged the grotto heaven's vitality. As you know, the grotto heaven has just been unsealed. There are still many things waiting to be done. Xiaoyang thought for a moment and said, if it was before, Xiaoyang wouldn't have thought much of it. But now they needed a steady stream to flow. They definitely couldn't do something like killing the goose that lays the golden eggs. Mu Yang nodded and said, so you want me to be the bad guy? I can't be considered an evil person. It would be much better if you were here to oversee the situation. When the time comes, Sundishing and the others will also issue some temporary regulations regarding the grotto heaven. Xiaoyang said patiently. Mu Yang waved his hand carelessly and said, it's just a small matter. I'll go sit above the grotto heaven later and tell those little fellows. Although Mu Yang said it was just a small matter, his heart ached. Previously, the drifting cloud world didn't have any grotto heaven or blessed lands. There wasn't even a single secret realm. Now that the grotto heaven had finally been unsealed, it would be a pity if it was wasted. Since it was something that belonged to his world, it naturally needed to be cherished. Those little fellows were overjoyed and didn't understand the logic behind it. That was normal. It wasn't that Xiaoyang was stingy. The main reason was that the drifting cloud world had always been a barren land. Now that it finally had some of its own wealth, it couldn't be squandered recklessly. In the end, it would be all for naught. Since Senior is here, I can go and open the next grotto heaven without worry. Xiaoyang said with a smile. Hearing this, Mu Yang's eyes widened. In the next moment, he was overjoyed. He had always thought that the drifting cloud world was barren, but now it seemed like it was also a rich world. It was just that its wealth was sealed away. Chapter 2073. Xiaoyang, tell me how many more grotto heavens there are in the flowing cloud world, Mu Yang asked as his heartbeat sped up. He wanted to know the answer very much, so that he would know how many good places there were in the world he lived in. At the same time, he felt quite sullen. If these grotto heavens had appeared earlier, the flowing cloud world would not have been suppressed by the demon realm and could not fight back at all. According to the world heart, there are 3 in total, Xiaoyang said slowly after hesitating for a long while. Mu Yang had told him this before, and he had worked very hard to get to where he was today. Of course, he felt that there was no harm in telling Mu Yang this. Even though this fellow did not seem to be very serious, he was not careless at all when it came to matters of right and wrong. Following this, Mu Yang gulped and nodded in satisfaction. Naturally, he understood the reasoning behind this. So our flowing cloud world is not bad after all. I just don't know what happened to our world tens of thousands of years ago for it to be like this, Mu Yang said as he sighed helplessly. If it was not for the great changes, how could such a situation have happened? As for the bitterness, the ancient records were very limited, and it was difficult to investigate. Even though Xiaoyang had obtained the world heart's recognition, he did not know what had happened tens of thousands of years ago. Since the heart of the world wasn't willing to talk about this matter, Xiaoyang naturally couldn't force it. Moreover, there were some things that he should not know, so Xiaoyang would not ask about it. After chatting for a while, Xiaoyang headed north. Mu Yang ordered the sect master to go to the northern light city, while he directly flew to the distant southern grotto to guard it in case anything happened. Ever since Mu Yang stood guard in the distant southern grotto, he had become the master there, and everything inside was under his control. As he headed to the extreme north, Xiaoyang began to think. During this period of time, he had also done a lot of things, not just opening up grotto heavens. He had also refined the mountain river map to the saint level in passing. Even the flying ship and the heavenly Qi mountain were completely absorbed. It was also because of these 2 saint-level magic treasures that the mountain river map, which was originally a heaven-level magic treasure, was promoted to saint level. The heavenly Qi mountain and the flying ship were already on the verge of collapse after a few big battles. If they were used by a strong opponent again, they would probably only end up collapsing. Now that it was placed in the stately painting as nourishment, it could be considered to have shown its final value. However, Xiaoyang later discovered another possibility, which was that after the stately painting absorbed these two magic items, it even nurtured them and seemed to be able to restore them. As such, it was a pleasant surprise. As for the Thunderfire Divine sword in his hand, he gave it to the World Core to refine and upgrade it. To the current Xiaoyang, a mid-level saint-level magic item was still not enough. As such, if he wanted to increase his battle strength, he naturally needed a magic item of a higher level. For hours later, Xiaoyang arrived at the extreme north, where the northern peak grotto was sealed. Then, Xiaoyang roared and pointed with his finger. Immediately, the sky was pierced, and a huge gap appeared in the clouds. The World Core had already passed the method to unseal it to Xiaoyang, so he knew what to do next. As long as he opened the seal, he could let the grotto fall. What he needed to do was to support the grotto and let it fall slowly so that it would not cause too much of a shock to the drifting cloud realm. After the gap appeared in the clouds, it could be said that it was snowing heavily. Even the surrounding temperature became a few degrees colder. Rumbling noises rang out continuously as if thunder clouds were surging. It was shocking. After the previous experience of opening the southern peak grotto, Xiaoyang already had experience. The noise was obviously because the seal was not completely unsealed. The two were pressing against each other, which was why there was such a commotion. This did not seem like much, but in the end the seal and the northern peak grotto would wear out. When the time came, the drifting cloud realm would be the one to lose. It seems like this method is not enough to completely open the grotto. I can only use my own strength to force a gap. Xiaoyang mumbled. Suddenly, he frowned and all of his strength began to gather. In the next moment, he leaped up and punched a gap in the clouds. In an instant, the clouds began to tremble. At the same time, countless bolts of lightning bombarded Xiaoyang. It was as if the clouds were enraged after being attacked. His body was comparable to that of a martial emperor. It could be said that he was extremely strong. When the bolts of lightning hit Xiaoyang's body, they were like tickles. The power of this punch was not to be underestimated. It could be said that the sound traveled 1,000 miles. Immediately, the cultivators in the extreme north looked up subconsciously. What they saw was that the sky began to shatter inch by inch. Countless bolts of lightning became extremely violent, as if the sky was about to split open. The hearts of countless people were filled with terror. Just what was going on? Could it be that the current drifting cloud world has already reached a time of trouble? But soon they saw a familiar figure. It was their Xiao Gongzhu who was punching the clouds. The drifting cloud realm had experienced too many things. Not long ago, Xiao Gongzhu had opened the southern peak grotto, which could be said to have shocked the entire drifting cloud realm. It could be said that Xiao Gongzhu was a godlike existence in the hearts of many cultivators. Some people even had his portrait hanging in their homes, who in the drifting cloud realm did not know Xiao Gongzhu. After seeing this scene, many people became even more excited. Could it be that Xiao Gongzhu was opening a new grotto? With this thought in mind, everyone became more and more excited. If that was the case, then their drifting cloud realm would have even more opportunities, and they would also benefit immensely because of this. After throwing a few punches in succession, Xiaoyang finally broke the seal in the clouds completely. Suddenly, a cold light attacked. Everywhere it passed, even the air froze. When the piece of land appeared, Xiaoyang immediately rushed up. He raised his hands and firmly caught the piece of land. Chapter 2074. Carrying such a huge piece of land on his shoulders could be said to be incomparably heavy. Even his veins were exposed. It could be said to be extremely strenuous. I didn't expect the North Peak Grotto Heaven to be several times heavier than the South Peak Grotto Heaven, Xiaoyang muttered. Even his hands began to tremble. Even though Xiaoyang had 7 spirit veins and a strong physical body, The force he could withstand was naturally extremely terrifying. However, now his body was trembling under the weight of the North Peak Grotto Heaven. From this, it could be seen how heavy this piece of land was. The heavier it was, the more Xiaoyang did not dare to let it fall freely. Otherwise, if such a weight were to fall, the entire flowing cloud realm would most likely tremble. Perhaps countless living beings would be affected by it. This was not something he wanted to see, so he could only forcefully endure it and not be careless in the slightest. Although most of them were upper-class cultivators, there were also many ordinary people. As the North Peak Grotto Heaven slowly fell, Xiaoyang also felt the weight on his shoulders become more and more terrifying. At the same time, his entire body had turned cold. It was as if he had fallen into an ice cave. It was difficult to describe Xiaoyang's current situation. In fact, the coldness he felt was even more terrifying than the mysterious ice that Luo Ku had unleashed. The North Peak Grotto Heaven had always been a place sealed in ice for tens of thousands of miles. The cold air condensed there was enough to freeze King Wu's realm. It was terrifying. In addition, the Grotto Heaven had been sealed for tens of thousands of years. The coldness inside was even more difficult to dissipate. The coldness inside was even more immeasurable. As the North Peak Grotto Heaven revealed its true appearance, the temperature within a radius of 10,000 miles immediately dropped by a lot. It was extremely shocking. The cultivators who were watching the show felt their fingers freeze. Those with weaker cultivations even felt the qi and blood in their bodies freeze. It was as if they were about to turn into ice sculptures. It was extremely uncomfortable. Many cultivators did not dare to stay any longer under such pressure. They flew even further away, wanting to leave the extreme north where they were about to be frozen. Seeing that he was only 3 feet away from the ground, Xiaoyang still did not leave. When it reached 5 feet, he bent his legs and continued to carry it. When he reached his limit, Xiaoyang appeared above the northern peak paradise in a flash. However, he forcefully grabbed the thickest peak with his hands, using his own strength to drag it down slowly. Even though Xiaoyang had done his best, when the northern peak Grotto Heaven landed, it was inevitable that the ground would shake. After doing all this, Xiaoyang flew up, and only then did he get a full view of the North Peak Paradise. The North Peak Grotto Heaven was much wider than the South Far Grotto Heaven. Snow and ice covered the entire place, and the mountain peaks stood tall, like sharp swords. Not long after, some of the mountain peaks and the ground began to tremble. Countless snowflakes began to swirl in the air. Roars of anger could be heard continuously. It was as if the beasts that had been sleeping for countless years had awakened at this moment. Not long after, those ferocious beasts revealed themselves and appeared on the land of the North Peak Grotto Heaven. There were even many birds and ferocious beasts among them. A ferocious beast comparable to rank 8 King Wu saw Xiaoyang standing there and immediately rushed over. However, in the end, it was slapped to death by Xiaoyang. Lord Xiao is so powerful. You killed such a ferocious beast with a casual slap. At this moment, a barefoot man walked over and said. Xiaoyang only smiled faintly and said, I'll have to trouble Senior to take care of this land in the future. The person who had come was Chu Taiyin. When Xiaoyang went to visit Muyang, he had told Sun Dishing to personally go to the Taiyin sect and invite Chu Taiyin to guard the Grotto Heaven in the extreme north. It's a piece of cake. Compared to Lord Zhao's ability to guard the Grotto Heaven, I'm really ashamed. Chu Taiyin smiled bitterly. When they first met in the Devil World, Chu Taiyin was an extremely important balance. But now, he had been left far behind by this young man. Chu Taiyin was only at rank 9 greater success, while Xiaoyang's spirit vein was enough to create 3 greater success cultivators. The North Peak Grotto Heaven seems to be much more dangerous than the South Peak Grotto Heaven. In addition to the bitter cold, even if I don't guard this place, I won't be able to cause any trouble. Chu Taiyin glanced down and said, Xiaoyang remained silent and looked down at the ferocious beasts that seemed to have just been released from their cages. However, it's fine for me to guard this place, in case the outside world covets it. Chu Taiying added, "Thank you." Xiaoyang cupped his fists and said. Chu Taiying waved his hand and said, "Making the drifting cloud world stronger is what we should do. Even if I don't have the ability to open up new territories like Lord Xiao, guarding this place is not a problem." After exchanging a few pleasantries, Xiaoyang looked toward the North Light City. Chu Taiying stood at the highest peak, and at this moment an aura of looking down on the world completely erupted. Back then, Chu Taiying had also become the strongest person in the drifting cloud world for a short period of time. Later on, he even entered the devil world alone. His murderous aura was real and not just spoken. His previous amiable expression was because this young man was someone he admired, and he was willing to be like this. "You beasts better behave when you see me. Otherwise, only death awaits you." Chu Taiying shouted. Once he said this, the ferocious beasts immediately went berserk. Those that were closer directly attacked Chu Taiying. Tens of thousands of beasts galloped, shaking the earth and mountains. The snow on the mountain peak was completely shaken and scattered. It was a very impressive sight. The arrival of the avalanche was so sudden. In the next moment, the rumbling sound was endless, and the smell of blood was constantly emitted. After half an hour, Chu Taiying stood at the peak, still as arrogant and overbearing as before. There were countless ferocious beast corpses under his feet, but there was not the slightest trace of blood on his robes. Many ferocious beasts were terrified and crawled on the ground, no longer as arrogant as before. I'll say it again. It's fine as long as you don't disturb my cultivation. Otherwise, only death awaits, Chu Taiying said sternly. Immediately, the ferocious beasts crawled on the ground, not daring to move. Scram! After hearing these two words, the ferocious beasts frantically fled as if they had been pardoned. Chu Taiying suddenly frowned as he watched those beasts flee, because he sensed an even more powerful aura. Chapter 2075. When the North Peak Grotto Heaven appeared, many people went to take a look out of curiosity. When the cultivators saw the beasts galloping and the avalanche, they were so scared that they immediately retreated, not daring to go up and take a look. After all, curiosity was not worth mentioning in front of one's life. After all, they couldn't risk their lives. If they gave away their Xiaoming for nothing, it wouldn't be a good thing. After the Northern Light City issued a few government decrees in succession, many people restrained themselves at this moment. Some cultivators who were prepared to go on an adventure had no choice but to put their plans on hold. Although this change came very quickly, and many people were unhappy, they didn't dare to be presumptuous when they remembered that it was an order from the North Light City and that there were people like Mu Yang and Chu Taiying guarding it. If the people guarding the two grotto heavens were from the North Light City, they could still make a fuss. However, these two were the ancestors of the Taiying sect and the Taiyang sect, respectively. Both of them had been famous for thousands of years and were highly respected people. How could they offend them? Sun Dishing quickly gathered the main figures of the other forces in the flowing cloud boundary and began to discuss the grotto heavens. After Xiaoyang returned to the North Light City, he ignored the outside world and went into seclusion to form his 8th spirit meridian. Due to the appearance of the North Peak Grotto Heaven and the fact that Xiaoyang could borrow the power of the flowing cloud boundary, he had an opportunity to form his 8th spirit meridian. How could he miss such a great opportunity? However, how long would this seclusion take? That was a huge problem. Last time, Xiaoyang had used half a year to come out of his closed-door cultivation. It was not a short period of time. It was also because he didn't care about it for half a year that those ignorant cultivators recklessly exploited it, causing the distant southern grotto heaven to lose some vitality. However, since this matter was handed over to Sun Dishing, and with Mu Yang and Chu Taiying guarding it, it was naturally a small matter. He didn't need to worry about it anymore. Before going into seclusion, Xiaoyang had made it clear that he was to listen to Sun Dishing's instructions and not make any mistakes. Due to the two great caves, the upper echelons of the flowing cloud world gathered together for a discussion. This discussion took half a month. Finally, they issued some rules. For example, no more than 100 people could enter the grotto heaven at once. At the same time, there were even restrictions on cultivation states and time limits for entering the paradise. These were all comprehensive rules without any loopholes. Fortunately, these terms were relatively lenient, and no one objected too much. On the contrary, some cultivators felt ashamed because everywhere they went, not even a blade of grass grew. They knew that this method was like draining the pond to catch all the fish, but they wanted to firmly grasp the opportunity in their own hands. However, he had forgotten that doing so would harm his foundation and could easily leave behind future troubles. A month later, as the regulations were passed down and popularized, everything gradually returned to normal. Only the North Peak Grotto Heaven had very few people going there. It was rumored that without King Wu's strength above the 7th level, going there would be suicide. As a result, more people stayed away from that place. Even someone as strong as Chu Tain, an almighty at the 9th level, was defeated there. She fought with a ferocious beast until both sides were heavily injured. There were many rumors and different opinions. However, they all knew one thing, and that was that even Chu Tain, the Vice Alliance leader, couldn't deal with a ferocious beast. Then what were they worth? Ever since Lord Xiao opened up the North Peak Grotto Heaven, there was no more news. Countless people were looking forward to it. What kind of achievements would Lord Xiao achieve in his seclusion this time? And what kind of terrifying level would his strength reach? After he exited, would he open up a new Grotto Heaven? It could be said that these questions had become the topic of discussion for most cultivators in the flowing cloud world. In the God realm, in an extremely large room, many cultivators sat facing each other. There were also some who stood. However, there were a lot more people standing than sitting in the hall. Those who could be here were the core figures of the God realm, Sword Heart World, and Sun Snow World. After the Sword Heart World and Sun Snow World received the invitation, they rushed over immediately. However, the journey was long, and they still spent a lot of time. If it was just a martial emperor traveling alone, it would only take a month. However, with the younger generation of their own, the speed was naturally slower. It's a pity that, although brother Xiao killed Han Jingming, he didn't manage to obtain the providence and break through to the martial emperor realm. As a result, our agreement with him is unable to take effect. The God Emperor sighed helplessly after he finished explaining what had happened. When he said that, the expressions of the crowd didn't change much. That was because the God realm was the main force. The two small worlds couldn't interfere with who they chose as their allies. Of course, because of the trip to the tomb of the God of Sin, Xiaoyang and Bai Jian were sworn friends. Therefore, the influence of the two worlds on Xiaoyang was not bad. Since the God Emperor has decided to carry out the plan, let's begin. The Sun Snow World has no objections. An old man in a snow-white robe with white hair and beard said with a smile. In the eyes of the people of the Sun Snow World, what they did was just icing on the cake. In fact, when they reached the middle world, they would need to rely on others for a long time. However, if they wanted to go further, there was no other way. My Sword Heart World doesn't have much of a problem. It's just that our three worlds are very far apart. How can we gather in one place? An old man who looked very resolute asked. The God Emperor smiled faintly and said, "That's not a problem. With 3 martial emperors working together and the power of the formation, we can move a small world." When he said that, the whole world was shocked. No one knew that the method used by the God Emperor was actually so simple and crude. Everyone, don't worry. Actually, 2 martial emperors can move it steadily. The reason why we need 3 is just in case. The God Emperor thought for a while and added. When the white-robed old man heard that, he laughed and said, "Since the God Emperor has made the arrangements, I have nothing else to say. In the future, the honor of the Sun Snow World will completely depend on the God Emperor. Don't say that. We are allies who share both honor and disgrace. Your words make it sound like the God realm is bullying our customers. The God Emperor smiled bitterly and said, convincing people with reason was what the God Emperor did. His actions were not about convincing people with force.